Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, a show about art, culture, politics, philosophy, etc., etc. All from, well, today, a mostly Nordic perspective. And I say mostly because we are tonight covering black metal, which I jokingly referred to as Scandinavia's top export. And we managed to get in contact with an American black metal enthusiast and I assume artist, from what I've understood. That's going to be joining us today. So, hence why I use the mostly Nordic term. We made it on time today as well, although it was quite close for me. Last time I moaned about doing renovations and how that eats into your time, and today it was the same thing. I've taken to sanding some old pine floors, and that eats up quite a bit of time. There's a Yankee in the Longhouse, Nordanon, you're quite correct. But I will start by introducing my co-host, as ever, Luddic Path. Welcome.
Hey now, it's your boy Nordic Path back again by popular demand. Doing the highly demanded black metal stream that I also voted for. So we're quite excited about this. Very happy.
Well, now we know that polls don't work if you can vote for them and skew the result.
Of course, it's he who counts the votes that matter. Just always remember that. Yeah, we made it look even, but there was never any choice.
No,
so
of course
not. It's too late now, right? But yeah, I'm pretty stoked about this one. It's going to be a fun stream, and I'm happy we got Luke with us.
Yes, I think so too. From what I understand, Luke, you have played in black metal bands in America. Is that correct?
Yes, a total of 3.
Total of 3.
Yes.
So you're going to be helping us with a bit of a more international view on the black metal scene, at least.
I definitely hope so. I think I have a perspective that could contribute something. And I mean, again, I've spent the last couple of years just digging into the genre and trying to figure it out. And I don't know, it's like I told you, I took an academic interest in it. So
yes. And last but not least, back from the Folktale stream, we have Vingel.
Hello. Almost thought you were about to say back from the dead there, but yeah, I'm in the house as well.
Easter was last week.
And yeah, looking forward to it. Like I said, I haven't done too much research specifically for today because I've been busy. I've actually been to a funeral and stuff, and
right.
Which isn't funny, of course, but yeah, and moving house very soon and stuff like that. But I've been listening to Dark Throne and Burzum and stuff while traveling, so.
Doing your homework, certainly.
Yeah, the stars are aligned. I mean,
at this point, you're becoming sort of our artistic correspondent. You've participated in pretty much everything that has to do with art on this show.
Yeah, I appreciate being invited back in spite of sort of a ramshackle style sometimes of speaking. So, yeah, looking forward to what you got today.
Yeah. But first of all, as we're waiting for people to come in and join the show, and as I'm going to be sharing the stream here on Twitter, etc., we wanted to cover some current events for the first couple of minutes. So I'm going to bring up our current events slide here, the Longhouse news, as you've called it, Luddic. Let's see here. And we want to move. Do you want to cover anything on last week in Counter Jihad, or is it the next slide?
Nah, you can just go on the next slide. I wasn't sure if you were gonna do like a news intro segment, but I don't think it's necessary.
I can't do like beep 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 beep. Yeah,
I was planning to make this actually some sort of bit, but I didn't have the time
in Counter Jihad. Yeah,
to write the skits here yet, but it's coming, people. We're every good thing has to pass. Yeah,
I particularly like this one.
This is going to be the format now.
So last week in Counter Jihad, we had an experience of the Swedish conditions and where a Danish far-right extremist was implicated. There are happenings in Sweden. Happenings which I think at this point are getting quite old, like the song and dance.
Yeah, this is a very common pattern. I mean, it's happened so many times. I don't have any intention of going into a history of all of these Swedish riots. And I mean, we did an episode about Sweden and about some of this stuff. Interestingly enough, on the first episode of the Longhouse, we talked with Emil, and when we were covering Hans Jørgen Lysglimt and the alliance, he talked about the party Stram Kurs, like basically a hard line from Denmark, with Rasmus Paludan, Rasmus Paludan. I'm not sure how he wants it pronounced, but this is the Dane that's implicated here. It's like this one-man party where this guy is basically almost like a kind of performance artist who travels around in Scandinavia doing Quran burnings, and that's what sparked the new riots in Sweden. So it's a sort of typical thing where the standard Muslim crowd go apeshit over this stuff, and the police have to come in. The police get attacked. Stuff is being burnt down. I don't know. I don't think there's been that many actual murders, but there's been property damage, and
there's usually a couple of police cars that have to pay the price. Yeah,
some property public damage, contempt of police, the standard song and dance here, and of course we get the standard kind of containment narratives in the media. With the Reset has probably had a field day with this stuff, where they're running like 4 or 5 articles every day on their takes of this stuff, and we told you, told you about Muslims, bro. Told you about it, With of course the predictably like the other part of the media talking about the dangers of far right extremism and why banning free speech is actually good. So yeah, we get the standard fake song and dance here. I don't know if you have anybody has something they want to add to this.
I think
diversity is our strength.
Indeed.
Yes.
I think the real question here, the true right perspective, as we call it here on the Longhouse, should be to look at how long this can go on. How many cycles of this do we need before this starts impacting normal people in some way? And already in Norway, there's been talk about restricting burning Qurans, etc. Not necessarily directly because of any free speech issue, but because of the consequences of it are getting out of hand, which then of course loops back to being a free speech issue, because you're allowing sort of the mob to affect you just because the police doesn't want to deal with it every time.
Let's see if you can bring up the link, the latest link I put in there, because you have a picture of this Rasmus guy.
Yes, just give me a moment and I'll pull up the...
Would be interesting to have a Dane on here to give us some more deep dive into this dude, but I read through some of these...
We're probably going to be covering that when we sometime in the future do the Denmark overview stream. Is this the second link you posted?
It's the second link. Yeah, there's something wrong with the first one. So... this guy, interestingly enough,
lad.
I mean, the look on this guy, it makes me kind of laugh. He looks a bit like a sort of retard. I don't mean that in an offensive way. He sort of proved himself to be.
He reminds me of that. There's
character.
This old YouTube guy who used to eat different stuff, and then he drank a bottle of vodka. That was his shtick back in the early days of YouTube.
The food reviewer,
something like that. Yeah.
Him.
I think
You're implicating him.
No, I'm just saying it looks like him. I don't remember his name.
He looks like something from the Tim and Eric Awesome Show or something, like some kind of John C. Reilly character.
He certainly looks Danish. I'll give him that.
I mean, basically what they're running with, they're talking. They're trying to paint this guy as basically a crazy person and. In the mainstream media, and they might be correct. What I read about him is that he was actually this very top performing cum laude law student, and he was in a car crash, and after that car crash he basically had some sort of personality alteration where he just he just runs around Scandinavia burning Qurans, starting riots. I mean, it's a nice racket.
Maybe he's an accelerationist.
Yeah, I thought so too, that he has basically no inhibitions, and now he's just going to do this kind of like Islam acceleration program. I mean, normally I would just call bullshit on this narrative and say that they're just trying to, they're doing the regular thing like they're doing with Putin and with Trump and all this sort of stuff, where they talk about that they have some kind of personal mental failing or something that makes them do this. But this isn't actually implausible. I know if you're familiar with the comedian Sam Kinison, I mean, he's dead now, but he was a bit more of this kind of edgy, loud American comedian in like the 80s and 90s. And I mean, he was actually on track to become a pastor until he was in a car accident, which apparently changed his personality to the point where he just run around doing these comedy shows where he just stands on stage screaming at people. So it's not implausible that this is something that could have happened to him. It doesn't take away from his message or anything like that, but it's not. I mean, it does happen.
As long as you arrive at the correct conclusion, I don't really care about what sort of methodology you use, really.
Yeah, we need more car crashes so we can increase the amount of based people in the population. There's no inhibitions. They just go like.
Nordan on comments that if there were no Mohammedans around these parts, this wouldn't be a problem, would it? Now, that would be a very interesting question to have a debate about in our, mainstream politics, but I think we should rather just ban free speech.
Yes, at least for white men. That's going to solve the problem for at least a couple of years. How long we can keep the lid on this?
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, etc.
No, but again, I mean, we've talked about this. I still do think it's a kind of fake containment narrative, but. I don't have too much to add on it. We could go to the next slide, and I'll just touch on the next.
The decline is continuing as foretold. I suppose is the messaging here.
All right, so we got then local tanky basically getting pushed out of the sort of Norwegian Red Party circles. There's been a case now with a woman from Trondheim who's a part of the Norwegian kind of Red Alliance. It's like one of these considered like this sort of mainstream Marxist parties in Norway, and she also had a position sitting on the board, I think, of this Motdag AS. That's the organization that owns Steigan. That's one of this like old school tanky, like sort of Nasball. I wrote Nasball there because I mean at this point that could pretty much be his ideology.
He's not far off. I've been paying attention to his page. We've talked about this a bit in private, Ludwig, about how he's been consistently good on a lot of issues for quite a while.
Yes,
at least as long as you take into account where his ideology or where he's coming from, and sometimes of course it's communist bullshit, to be honest, but the analysis is so much better because he holds a position outside the Overton window. Yeah,
he's sort of free to just say whatever he likes. I mean, he's also another guy. I was watching his interview on Wolfgang V, that Norwegian podcaster, and he talked about that he basically he had cancer and he sort of survived like third stage cancer, and after that, it's like, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I'm just going to like write whatever I feel like. I'm not going to bother with this Overton window stuff, and that's what you get from him. Like he's just going to be like this balls out like Marxist, old school Marxist analysis, and that's so outside of the Overton window at this point, where we're basically just running like this kind of like globo homo corpo leftist narrative, and he's pissing a lot of those people off. So the Red Party have to wash their hands of him.
A quite high profile, basically takedown of him in the Evening Post this week, with a guy basically shouting at him because he dares to question. Or he dares to have an objective view on the Ukraine situation, and that's a grave sin in the.
Was this the Andreas Slettholm article?
I think so.
Yeah, I just need to find his Twitter because he put the he posted that article on Twitter, and like the reply was just like this screaming Wojak with like the mask on. Like that's
A lot of
so there are
the
other
comments
people, yeah.
even on that article, like on the Evening Post website, were like, "What are you doing, dude?" I mean, you have to understand that Russia is a different nation. They're allowed to have like other opinions.
Yeah, he has no opinions, but this guy's like Andreas. We should bring him on because I've been looking into him and like the family that he comes from. This is like the sort of Norwegian upper like priest class, upper
Yes.
bourgeois people, where his dad was like this sort of Christian Democrat Party top guy who wrote the same kind of like center liberal garbage in the Mail, and so he got a position in that newspaper. The more I'm looking into it, there seems to be like this sort of pipeline between the Evening Post and a lot of these political institutions.
There seems to be a lot of overlap, yeah, which is
Yeah.
why I call it like I call the Evening Post the sort of the midwit central, because that's usually where you find the most GAE opinions.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, there's no analysis anymore. It's just kind of opinion making and dictating what's within the Overton window and what's not fashionable to believe in.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think we spent enough time on this.
Yeah.
We gotta get into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah, this is why we're all here. We're going to talk about extreme metal in Scandinavia. Now, I want to preface this with a bit of my own history with extreme metal, because I'm not really a black metal kind of guy. I have been to, I think, 2 black metal concerts in my time. The first time was very it was a different experience, let me put it that way. When you have very little to no even heavy metal experience, and you go into something like that. But it did open my mind for the theatrics, which led me to go on a bit of a power metal stint for a while in my listening habits, which then looped back into, I was very into something called dungeon synth. I don't know if anyone listening to this know what that is. It's for a couple of years, and like going through power metal into dungeon synth has allowed me to sort of acquire the taste for black metal, because as far as I understand, dungeon synth has roots in black metal, and so getting ready for the stream, listening to various black metal songs and albums, I can appreciate it from a cultural and an artistic point of view. And I think any viewer who might think that, black metal, oh, it's just Satanism and evil, stick around for a bit. Maybe you learn something about the deeper and I think slightly reactionary roots of extreme metal.
And by the way, you can notice if you were to just do like a pure synth recreation of a lot of black metal, it starts sounding like sort of haunted house Transylvania music, like
yeah,
a lot
sure.
of dungeon synth. If you just trace, if you use the same chord progressions there. Yeah. So
yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. So as you say, that's what became dungeon synth is basically started from that, I guess.
Now, before we get into talking about metal specifically, I am going to shill for a moment. I should have done this at the start of the stream, but I have started a Subscribe Star. And on the Subscribe Star, we are going to be posting content from time to time, where which might not be suitable to be sent out on YouTube. I know Ludic Path has some ideas that I have vetoed as under the banner of I don't want my channel to be nuked before I'm even monetized. And this is a good place, I think, to put them. So if you enjoy the Longhouse, and if you want to read a bit about my thoughts for the channel going forward, consider subscribing, or just head on over and read the post. If you subscribe for $10 or more per month, you will be getting access to the coming media there. And as I say in the post, alternatively, you can use that money for Netflix, but then you should probably go watch Netflix instead of this, because I don't want you in my audience. And with that, let's get right into extreme metal. Do you guys have anything you want to say before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, I could say a little bit about my own background going into this. I mean, between the ages of 13 to I think about 17, I was like extreme metal, like sort of death metal, black metal. That was like one of my main interests. If you asked me what I wanted to do for a living at that point, I would have told you that I wanted to live as sort of an extreme metal musician, or just basically as a guitar player, or sort of as in one of these hardcore bands. Of course, that's something that never came to fruition. And like as I got older, I sort of left the scene, lost a bit of interest in it. I moved more onto this sort of ambient electronic music, but I realized that there's actually a lot of overlap there between the people who like this kind of ambient electronic stuff and the people who like the extreme metal. So I've kept sort of half an eye on the metal scene, moving out of it, so I have at least some passing knowledge of like the Scandinavian, like the history of extreme metal in Scandinavia, and the bands that are actually worth listening to and the bands that aren't, and so forth. But what about Luke? I mean, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm from a reasonably large city in the southern United States, and we had a very active underground music scene until very recently that I was involved with for many years. I started playing hardcore punk principally, and then kind of moved into black metal because I'm kind of like you. I got interested in black metal around like 13, 14, something like that. I listened to, I think it was Death Crush was the first black metal record I listened to, and it really freaked me out then. But it's like upon subsequent listens, I just got more and more and more into it, and started watching the documentaries and all that kind of stuff. I eventually found a couple guys that wanted to play black metal and kind of try to start a scene, I guess, essentially, and did that for a while. And yeah, I mean, I kind of got fed up playing live music just because there was a lot of kind of dumb drama and stuff with a lot of the bands, and people banning us from venues, and spreading rumors about us on the internet. So at that point, I just started kind of collecting like black metal music and media, and yeah, that's about it. Like I said, it's an academic interest at this point. So
that's pretty cool to hear about that. I mean, you could probably get into it later, a bit more about the scene and why they tried to ban you and so forth. I mean, there's the people that you're dealing with in these scenes are usually not very stable, in my experience, and you get a lot of these kind of midwit lefty people in this scene who are just like completely ideologically motivated. So it's going to be hard if you're trying to do like some sort of Varg Vikernes tribute band.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't have too many like overt leftists, I would say, in the scene around here, but the issue is the ones that were very ideological and very kind of tanky. They're very vocal, and they're going to go around and talk to concert promoters and venue owners and stuff like that. They're going to post about you on social media. They're going to, again, start groups talking about musicians that need to be blacklisted and stuff like that. So that's
standard operations, basically.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And we have a fairly active kind of Antifa aligned group. It's affiliated with some of the, it's outright communist parties. Not that they have any power, but they have a decent amount of funding and a lot of wackos that are willing to, volunteer years of their time to do this shit. So,
but yeah, I mean, props, because being blacklisted is actually very black metal. I think those people should understand that. I mean, that's kind of what it's about, really.
Yeah, it ended up kind of turning around in our benefit, because some of the more underground venues, and people would like clear out their basement and have us and a couple of other bands play. It was pretty cool. I mean, it was a really cool time, man. And if, again, I hadn't been kind of so bitter, and if the music scene was kind of still kicking like it was a few years ago, I'd probably be more interested in getting back into it. But yeah.
Okay, I think we'll just head into the first slide here, which details what we want to talk about throughout the rest of the slides coming up.
Yeah, this is just a quick overview here. The picture is from a book that's called basically Nuances of Black, sort of Shades of Black, which I was going to read, but it hasn't arrived yet, unfortunately. So I had to watch some other material to prepare for this. But it's about.
And if you want to do a deep dive into some of the history of black metal in Norway specifically, Vingel has been very good at uploading various documentaries lately related to the topic. So after you watch this, you can head over to his channel.
I uploaded one at least until the light takes us.
Yes, that's in English, and it details a lot of the black metal scene in Norway as it originated and grew.
Yeah, it's an English title of a translation of a Bursum record, actually. Vislisa Taros.
Yes.
By the way, Harald Fossberg, the guy you see, the author here, he did an hour-long interview with Nocturno Koto of Dark Throne when they were given some sort of recognition by Nasjonalbiblioteket, National Library, for the A Blaze in the Northern Sky record. So yeah, but that's for people who are interested to delve deeper into it.
So yeah, you have the documentary on Vingel's channel, Until the Light Takes Us, on the Norwegian kind of state-sponsored TV NRK. You have the documentary Helvete, historien om norsk black metal, translated Hell, the story about Norwegian black metal. It's free online. I think if you have a VPN to pretend you're under a Norwegian server, you should be able to see it. I don't know if it's blocked for internationals or how that works, but I saw that as well. So it's like a 4-part documentary. It's quite well produced, although it doesn't. They were not able to get a hold of Varg to do any interviews, so that was a bit disappointing.
I suspect he didn't want to talk with.
Yeah.
Okay. That being said, he did talk to the makers of the other documentary, so you get quite a long interview with Varg if you're interested in that.
Probably
it's from quite a few years ago.
That's probably one of my favorite interviews Varg did, honestly. Like, that documentary is really well put together. I'd recommend anybody watch it.
It really does, if nothing else, let him sort of express his views in a coherent manner. It doesn't take anything out of context.
Yes.
And it paints him in a more objective light. I mean, not to, make light of anything he did, obviously.
For sure, but it's Varg kind of in his own words, and no one's trying to assign an agenda, color anything that he's saying.
Certainly.
But yeah, just to explain here, it's just two bullet points. First part of the presentation is just to present just a kind of general look at extreme metal. It's like where it comes from and how it develops and so forth, and how it can be identified and understood, especially for people in our scene. And the part 2 will be just looking at like the Norwegian black metal history, which is not a very long history, by the way. I mean, it's most of it is within my own lifetime. Assume the same for the people on the stream right now, with it starting at just like the end of the 80s, and it kind of ending with the commercialization of black metal in the 2000s. Although the scene does go on, it doesn't, the true Norwegian stuff, it never quite you can't recreate it. It only happens once, in my opinion.
Yes, it's one of those people and places and ideas sort of coalescing moments into an art form. And then with all of these, what I get the feeling after looking into it is that these are a lot of, as artists often are, strong personalities that take their art eventually in different directions. So I think a lot of these people still produce very good art in their own way today, even though it might not be black metal anymore, strictly speaking.
Yeah, and a lot of them are dead as well.
Well,
but
that too.
it's something that I'm going to get into later. But like this is like black metal, in my opinion, is almost like the ultimate kind of Generation X type movement,
I
which
can see that.
really sort of is about the kind of authenticity, or the kind of the middle class trying to escape itself and really find a kind of authenticity, usually ending with kind of dramatic suicide, sort of
Yeah,
a la the Nirvana, Kurt Cobain
Yep.
stuff. It's like you try to go for authenticity, and you realize you can't break out of the system. And the more you try to break out of the system, the more popular you become as a type of product. And then it has
It
to
was
end in
good of you
suicide.
to mention Nirvana there, because looking into it, I found myself thinking that this has some kind of, like, cultural wise, it has some similarities to the grunge movement in that sense, not necessarily an expression, but in the way that it is this sort of almost manic search for some kind of meaning for a generation that had absolutely nothing. And for someone like, say, Varg, that is a hardcore sort of deep dive into Old Norse paganism, while for some of the others it might be, well, I can't come up with any.
Yeah, it's just
right
like pure nihilism ending in
it's pure nihilism
suicide, right?
to the
Like, I mean, Nirvana is really the same way. It's like, I'm a millennial, right? And I imagine for millennials and Gen Z people, like Zoomers, listening to this stuff and like listening to Nirvana, it just, in my humble opinion, I don't think Nirvana is that impressive musically. I mean, if you're just given like a Nirvana album, I would have trouble just finishing it. And it's the same thing with some of these black metal albums as well. You just listen to it and you think, well, it sounds like crap, but you kind of have to understand that it's supposed to kind of sound like that for a type of cultural significance.
Yes.
That is very sort of within like the Generation X zeitgeist, that if you don't understand it, you're kind of not cool enough.
Can I just say on that, I think you're right, of course, that a lot of the black metal scene were nihilists, basically. But I think a lot of it is sort of retrospective view as well. I mean, they were most of these guys were pretty much really angry, frustrated teenagers, early 20-somethings. And but I think when you watch later interviews, they can seem to be, some of them, to be sort of like philosophizing about what it was like, connecting it to Nietzsche and stuff. And sure, like teenagers read Nietzsche as well. But my point is, I don't think all of it was nihilistic. I think a lot of it was true attempt to sort of reconnect with something real and with heritage and the roots of the nation, whatever.
Yeah, I think it was a quote unquote true rebellion against the zeitgeist that they inherited from the boomers.
It was against what Varg Vikernes refers to as hamburger culture, basically.
Right, and listening, we talked about the interview of him and him in his own words, and I think if you listen to that interview in that documentary, you realize that, if you've disconnected the name, that could be something that pretty much any dissident right at this point would be saying, whatever he says. When it comes to the state of modernity.
Yeah, I think Varg, we get into him later, but he's been very sort of avant-garde in terms of forming kind of dissident right opinions. So it should not be discounted. He has laid down a lot of the framework, especially for like this type of pagan worldview.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to map the heavy metal to extreme metal move here.
Yes.
That probably happened at the late 80s.
I mean, looking at, I was looked at Wikipedia and these different articles, and I was tempted to make like this sort of map, like go on this kind of chart IO or something, and have these really elaborate charts as to like the inheritance of these different bands and how they relate to each other and how one genre springs from the other genre. And so, but it just gave me a headache. I needed to. I'll just try to explain it a little bit simpler. And I assume that Luke and Ving will just correct me if you think I'm totally off base here. But like the original kind of heavy metal movement as it springs out of the rock, at least the part that's the most relevant to talk about the development of black metal and extreme metal, is really like the new wave of British heavy metal, starting with Black Sabbath as considered the sort of original band that this springs out of. I mean,
it's the best band ever, basically.
Yeah.
Top bands ever.
But to understand, like the original kind of heavy metal movement, it's very much kind of a baby boomer phenomenon, and it has a lot of that. It has some of that idealism and some of the showmanship and these ideas in it. Of course, you have an American scene with bands like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and so on, but like the British scene is where like they really bring in this kind of more grim, dark dimension to it.
They were British though, both Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin British?
Yeah,
Yes,
Deep
I
Purple.
believe so.
Oh boy. Oh well, I'll just shut myself up here. Well, which bands were American then? Did they have anything in this scene?
Oh, I don't know.
No.
I don't
Cream,
know.
maybe. Oh well.
If there were bands, they probably sucked.
Don't throw too much shade on yourself there. But yeah, then I guess we'll just say it's the kind of British, the British scene is sort of responsible for the whole thing, with Black Sabbath being like the band coming out of this more industrial town, and they like the mythology around it. I assume it's some truth to it, that like the guitarist basically had some of his fingers chopped off in a sort of industrial accident. And because he had this damage done to his fingers, he had to tune his guitar down to have to make it easier for him to play on it, which then creates like a different type of sound that makes them a bit more unique. And that's where like this kind of darker metal sound starts to come in, and they try to develop more in that kind of direction, and that inspires again other bands. I mean, like you have the British bands. You start with the Black Sabbath, then you get the Motorheads that are a bit more heavy, Judas Priest. Venom is another kind of British band there, where you look at the album cover where the album is called Black Metal. I think this is the first time that that expression is being used, and the black metal bands are sort of directly related to Venom. I mean, if you listen to it and you look at it, it is just kind of like a bit more goofy in a sense. It doesn't have the kind of bleak Gen X kind of totally serious atmosphere to it. It's a bit more I mean, those who know, you can check it out if you want to. From Venom, you have like
it's a bit more over the top in its design, definitely.
Yes, and everyone needs to check them out.
Yep. I mean, I think the Venom were one of the first people to use these kind of nails in their image. Like they would, what's the English expression where they have this kind of leather bullets, these kind of nails, and you know that, Luke?
We call them bracers here.
Yeah.
Yeah, bracers.
We just basically have these kind of bracers. They look more kind of warrior-like, and they use more of this sort of satanic occult lyrics. Some other bands that come out of that is you have the Celtic Frost and Hellhammer. I think they're from like the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken. Bathory from Sweden. Switzerland, yes.
Yes. I'm
glad I have you on board.
I'm glad to be here.
Let's see. So this is like this is basically where like the start of heavy metal and how it kind of develops as a type of it's a kind of organic evolution of these bands trying to stand out and trying to, like, I mean, you come into the scene as a new band and you're inspired by Black Sabbath. You want to sound like Black Sabbath, but if you sound like them, Black Sabbath already exists, so you need to do something else. You need to basically have some USP, as they call it, the unique selling point. And if you go to the next slide, Walrus, we can talk a little bit more about that. I mean, the idea then is that you try to develop the metal in a kind of more extreme direction. You have metal that's going in other directions as well, like from the 80s and up. There is a kind of movement to mainstream metal where you get more of this kind of American hair metal scene, where it's going more for like this, almost like this kind of proto transgenderism and power ballads.
Yeah.
this type of scene. But then you have like the other side of the coin where people are just completely rejecting this type of commercialism, and they're trying to create a niche that's a little bit heavier, a little bit faster, a little bit more extreme. So you have different ways that you can try to develop an image for the band. Like they would try to use different types of makeup with the costumes, body modifications for some of them. Tattoos is sort of a staple, like with the piercings. The soundscape of this is also a sort of staple of metal. I guess one of the things is like the double bass drums. That's quite typical. I didn't. I might have it pictured later in the stream, but that it's sort of you basically need to have drums that sounds like this kind of tunnel digging type vibe to it, where like one bass drum is not enough, so you need to have two bass drums to create this kind of drilling fast sound. Distortion is another thing where
it's like a purity spiral of music.
It is like a purity spiral of music, except it's not purity. It's just like the opposite thing.
I guess it's just a spiral.
It is at least some type of spiral here. So, I mean, the start of rock music, it comes along with the idea of distorting the guitar sound, where you get like the electric guitar sound. It's not just about the guitar being plugged into an amplifier, but they need a sort of effect on using an effect on the amplifier to distort the sound. And that's also my take on the development of the vocals, is that the vocals also has to become distorted, either by using a machine to do it, or they will try to explore these type of different vocal techniques. Like for regular people, it's just screaming, right? I mean, but for the metal enjoyers, like the metal appreciators, it's like a fine art of the connoisseurs of metal is like the fine art of developing different screaming techniques that can be maintained and make the music more intense.
I would say there is a purity to it, though. By the way, I mean, it's the purity of pure fucking Armageddon.
Yes.
So that's the whole idea. Pure death, total death.
Pure total death. Like with the guitars, like I said, with Black Sabbath, they were the first, I think, to try to tune the guitar down. And this is something that is typically done, is that you have a regular 6-string electrical guitar. And I remember when I played guitar too, I was completely obsessed with this sort of guitar tuning stuff, is that you if you're going to tune it down to like a sort of E sharp or something, you tune it down to a D tuning, drop tunings. You try to make it darker and darker until the point where they just add a 7-string on top of it that is even deeper. So you get that in bands like say like Fear Factory that has a 7-string. Meshuggah, I guess, is one of the other ones that is where they go into like this more kind of gent genre where the guitar is like almost like a type of percussion, and they're just hammering it almost like a kind of drum. I mean, you have some other
something for me. You talked about sound and vocals. That was the big hurdle as someone coming outside and getting sort of like a shock treatment of black metal at a live concert. Was overcoming the sort of, or getting to the understanding of the vocals as quote unquote just another instrument. It's not supposed to be necessarily the lead quote unquote melody, as it often is in a lot of more mainstream music.
Yes,
it's about creating a soundscape, and I think in a much better way than any prog rock I've ever encountered.
Agreed. And I mean, with the vocal, it has to be understood as an acquired taste, because you get this a lot with people. It's like they want to listen to some metal that's a bit more, say like some Metallica is a bit more kind of safe metal if the vocal is clean, and they can make it a little heavier, a little bit more saturated, but they try to stay away from the screamy stuff. But it has to be understood as a kind of acquired taste of people who have listened to metal for a while, and you want to take it into a more kind of intense, dark place, where that just sort of becomes kind of an art form into itself. I don't know, Luke, do you have anything to add in terms of
just really quick
soundscape?
As far as the vocals go, I mean, I think that's one of the things that black metal did that gave it an edge on grunge and punk and a lot of the other music, especially going into the 90s, is it successfully gate-kept itself. And I think that going into it, people should know that we are looking to gatekeep a little bit. At least I am. As far as, come as you are. If you want to listen to it, that's great. But if you don't want to, then just leave us alone. Because I definitely agree. Like, the vocals are another instrument. It's less about hearing the music and understanding the vocals, and it's black metal is a genre, is something you kind of have to let just wash over you in a way. Especially going to shows and stuff like that. Yeah,
and I think certainly the point here isn't that everyone's going to be a high black metal connoisseur after watching this, but you might be able to give it a try, and maybe with a new perspective.
Yes, it's
and certainly I'm no sort of I don't listen to black metal all the time. I'm not really into black metal, so it's not like you have to do it. It's something I can have a hit of every now and then go to something else.
Yes. And I mean, yeah, just like Luke said, we get back to the gatekeeping later. The gatekeeping is a very fascinating element, to the point where, like, the black metal genre has been able to sort of guard itself against any commercialization. It's just like completely normie proof in in many ways, where it's like it's just so inherently contrarian. But I'll get back to that when we
I'm
do
gonna have to say it,
yeah.
because it popped into my head and I cannot share the thought of that. Are we saying that black metal is the Dark Souls of music genres?
absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, even Dark Souls became more kind of commercialized.
Fair enough.
So
It's got to be
like
Demon Souls or something. Yeah,
it's like if they made the graphics shittier with every iteration. They just they made the game harder and the graphics
intentionally
worse.
shittier. Yeah,
They made the graphics intentionally worse and the sound design intentionally worse to keep people
I'm sorry,
out.
I just had to ask the question now that it popped into my head.
Can I just add on that smooth transition when it comes to vocals and making the soundscape shittier on purpose? I mean, Dark Throne started out as a death metal band, which is more muscular sort of expression, musical expression, and they progressively made. I mean, they had really good production, like on a Blaze in the Northern Sky, their second album, first sort of almost fully black metal album. But then by the fourth record, it was just like you could barely hear any bass at all. And I think Fenris, who is one of the guys in the band, pointed out himself that Nocturnal Culto, he really brought some oomph to the vocal style as well. But a lot of people who tried to replicate that sound just ended up sounding like Donald Duck. So a lot of the
Right.
late 90s black metal is, I mean, you got to have some force behind it as well. You can't just shriek, So that's
Yes.
I think that's a bit. I mean, I really love the aesthetics, but that's a bit of a hurdle for me with the later bands.
It
So-
certainly is an acquired taste, as you guys said. It's the same with a lot of other things. You can't just sort of take a hit of some finely aged wine and expect it to go down quite as easily as something from last year, to use something that's more close to my area of expertise. And black metal, I find, is very much the same way. You have to build up to it in a way.
Yes, I mean, the '90s is like the decade of kind of Generation X and the decade of making things more extreme, like you see in the picture here with the '90s kid. People are doing extreme sports and extreme TV shows. So you see that fade away a lot with the millennial generation coming of age. Things get a little softer.
We get into the Fresh Prince era, so to speak.
I always dismayed that stuff. So it's something that I talked to my wife about this week, is that I realized that a lot of the taste that I have being a millennial is actually a lot of Gen X stuff, because I was raised on a lot of bargain bin culture, basically. Like my mother never wanted to buy me like sort of newest films or the newest music or video games or anything like it. So I always get like the really old stuff. And when you get used to that, I almost have no interest in a lot of the more kind of millennial innovative things that come down the line. But getting back to the slide and the topic here, I mean, Vingel mentions death metal, and that's kind of another way, like they use other means to make the music extreme than black metal does, and how these two things are different. Where, let's say, the one of the sort of death metal selling points usually, and the reason that the way they try to sort of gatekeep or make their music more extreme is by technicality, is that they'll, make the music more and more technically difficult. Speed would be an element. They make it faster. They use different types of scales, a lot of guitar solos that, instrumentation and so on.
That's something you usually find that the real guitar artists, they get really into like subgenres of metal, because you can get like wonky 3/7
that's what I was
pacings.
like, I guess, in when I was a teenager. I was just sort of obsessed with this kind of weird time signatures and playing these sort of songs. It was just all about like finding the new most extreme thing. If it's sort of like you go to from like, I listen to Cannibal Corpse, and then I go to listen to Nile, and then I go to like Necrophagus or some of these bands. It has to just be more and more extreme, and it's good production, and it sounds it's well produced and put together, but it's like in the music is kind of completely unapproachable because of it sounds so weird compared to a lot of other things. There's a kind of intermix there with progressive rock as well. So I mean, the bands.
If I could add something really quick. Yeah, I think the issue with death metal now is it's gotten into this like masturbatory spiral where they're obsessed with making the most complex riffs with the most complex time signatures and key signatures, and I mean, it's pretty awful.
Yeah, there is only one way to go, right? You have to just keep making it more convoluted until people lose interest at some point.
I was going to say, I mean, exactly. you can do that. You can have that like crazy, I suppose, like Jacob Collier academic interest in the music you're making, but at some point no one's going to listen to it. When the rules of the music you're making is whatever I think sound nice, it's the only rule. You're going to have hits and misses, and eventually everybody's going to stop listening, no?
Yeah, no, I mean, people can only stay interested in this for so long. I mean, you see a lot of these sort of small communities that form around these specific genres. Like, I remember with Meshuggah, they had a period where like gent was like the shit. That was people were going on YouTube and making gent videos where they just buy a 7-string guitar and they try to, check out this riff, bro. It's like some weird time signature syncopation thing that they try to
those
just.
Those were very dark times.
Sure.
I gotta just say, since I'm associated with this, that I was always on the other end of that spectrum. So, I mean, there's a lot of complex music that's cool, of course, but I just remember thinking people who were ranting and raving about Dream Theater and Porcupine Tree and Opeth and complexity and stuff was just sort of, whatever. I was more into the punk aspects.
Yeah. And just the atmosphere of black metal too, I found way more interesting than,
I don't want to sort of make this into sort of grade school. I'm just saying.
Dick measuring contest of music. Well, I can drop my poor credentials right away and say that, my favorite music is usually just hard rock. So that's probably as boring as you can get nowadays. With like, I mean, I think we can all agree that technicality was never the intent of AC/DC.
No, I mean, most of these popular band work fine. Like you barely need any technical ability to play it, and you don't need that to have the music sound good at all. It's just like this kind of it's like this. It's just a sub community thing. It always becomes like this. I liken it to say bodybuilding, for instance, where you have like the only people who are interested in it are just people who just do it compulsively, who just want to see people with bigger and bigger muscles. To like the regular person, it's just disgusting, right? They're not interested in seeing people look like that.
At the same time, though, if we're going to expand that for a moment, is that the only way to guard a subculture?
No, I mean,
Because-
you could the black metalers didn't do it that way. They didn't make it more technical, but they did guard it in the sense of like this kind of the purity spiraling, where they always try to be more kind of pure
Yeah,
black metal.
that's what I
purely
mean.
authentic. So the last part here is the making it more extreme with the content of the music, and of course like the death metal. You have this kind of like gore metal, I guess, is a sort of subgenre that is it is just kind of death metal with a higher emphasis on this kind of horror movie gore aspect, where it has to just get more and more and more grotesque, to the point more explicit, like this kind of Eli Roth type films. I mean, you can't scare people as much these days with sort of horror, occultism and nihilism, because I guess, in the 60s and 70s, when you still had people growing up in these more traditional Christian families, you could use that to kind of gatekeep them. But these things have become so mainstream through different like TV shows and movies. So yeah, I'd almost say that like kind of ideology is a way to kind of gatekeep people out of music, but then it becomes almost a little bit too much. Like you're just completely buried underground because then you're basically making yourself the enemy of the government just to kind of make an artistic statement.
Or you're quite literally buried underground in the case of Euronymous.
Yeah, but it wasn't because of his anti-government sentiments.
No, it wasn't. But you could argue that it's ideological reason, if not nothing else, a bit of a power struggle.
Yep.
Right. Helmos says, in regards to the death metal stuff, that the technicality spreads. It's hard to get a new thrash metal album without death metal influences. The old school sound is dying out.
I don't doubt it. But I guess we could skip to the next slide.
Yeah. So the thing to take away from here is that this is extremity for extremity's sake, in a bid for being unique, I suppose, is becomes the name of the game here.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to understand the development of these bands and how they develop. It's all about just trying to fill a niche with some new, unique selling point in terms of how you're more extreme than the last guy. And of course, that stops at some point. It stops being interesting, but then you get like these other things coming in that's like this more touchy-feely millennial new metal stuff that's kind of gay in its own right. But yeah, we can do another stream on that.
Moan about your feelings or something.
Okay, this one is quite interesting as well. It's like the metal as a type of entertainment product. And here I don't just cover extreme metal, but you have some more kind of moderate, moderate metal band. Ghost, I guess, has been one of the few sort of interesting newer metal things to come out, where their music is really not that heavy in the classical sense, but they just try to imitate this more kind of classical 70s, 60s style.
It's a Scooby-Doo soundtrack.
Yeah, it really is. But I mean, you have the shock rockers that say like Alice Cooper, for instance, that come first with this kind of thing. I think he's like one of the first sort of transgender rockers to come out and to try to use that taboo as a selling point. But even now, I think that would be hard to use as a USP.
Is he actually trans or?
Nah, well, no, not in his private life, but
Okay.
his.
Okay,
but I mean,
but
you have a man that's basically like has an alter ego that's like that's called Alice, that sort of wears makeup, and the way that he explains it is that he has like this alter ego that's like either a woman or this kind of like what do you call it, like this bi-gender or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of words in my head that I can't say.
The same
basically just went full circle on the extremity and ended up back to leftism.
Yeah, that's just normal now. But he's not leftist. I think Alice Cooper is like Christian now. A lot of these there seems to be like two paths, especially for the American bands. It's either they go like born again Christian fundamentalists, or they just die from a drug overdose. There's no
well, fair enough.
Yep.
Pick your ending.
Yep. Marilyn Manson also continues that stuff, like the kind of trance, a bit more of that's got a shock rock stuff and being extreme in that way. Gwar is something I added in here, where it's really more of a hardcore punk band. They have some albums that are more metal, some that are more just kind of rock and experimental. Gwar is the band in the bottom left corner here. Like I think they're the band that's probably it's almost inarguable who's put the most effort into, the kind of the image and the theater of it over the music. I think I'm one of like 5 Norwegians who's been to a Gore concert, because they mostly tour inside of the United States. I mean, they're also quite extreme in terms of the comedy and the sort of stage stuff that they get into, without just, it has to be this kind of, we're just kind of shitting on everybody type thing, because some of it is so unpolitically correct that it's I mean, we can show some clips from it later, but I liken this stuff to, it's almost a little bit like professional wrestling, where the more they can sort of stay in these characters, the more they can launch themselves into the public. You have this with Ghost there, that's like the top left image, where the kind of Ghost concept is that you have the Pope, or like the anti-Pope character, that's the guy in the middle, and the kind of underlings that he has like 4 other members who are just these sort of masked shadowy figures. And the joke is that they basically with every album he changes his makeup a little bit, so they say that they get a new Pope, but they basically had the same guy doing the Pope, and they changed the people who are kind of like
this?
the backup players. Let's see, I don't know that, because his name came out. It's a bit of a
Tobias Forge, I believe.
Tobias Forge, yeah, some Swedish guy.
And I think my second black metal performance I ever went to was not that, but something like it, where the show factor was certainly a bigger part of it than the first one, which was more about the music, and they were all dressed up in like monk robes, and it was candle lights and chanting and all that stuff, which it was certainly entertaining.
The music of Ghost is actually surprisingly catchy and listenable. It has a lot of like influences from ABBA and like Blue Oyster Cult and this sort of
I see.
More, it's not really, they're not going for this kind of extreme heavy stuff at all. It sounds actually quite commercial. And the stage show, they brought in like the incense and a lot of light shows and stuff. It was pretty funny to see. You could just for a showcase here, if you see the link that's called Stage Antics, you can see a part of the Gore show.
Is that the Gore show?
Yeah, that's the Gore show.
Okay, let me get that up on
so you
the
sort of see
here.
how they go pretty far with their jokes. They have the song "He Who Must Not Be Named," where they bring out the their character that's like the devil.
Oh, and he's fighting the devil on stage.
Yep. Some conspicuous symbolism going on there.
Okay, I'm gonna stop before I get copyright struck or something.
No, but this is on YouTube. But I guess it's not sort of a. It's not
please,
a
Susan, please.
We might have to censor, but it's not like a political band in that sense. But they're
I was more thinking that I'm gonna get a copyright notice on my video, not actually like a takedown, but like
yep.
They'll take the audio out or something.
I mean, if they haven't put a takedown notice on this video, but it could still happen.
Certainly a show, isn't it? It's very Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, it's like Power Rangers and pro wrestling and Conan.
This is what I liked about like power metal, because it like embraces all of that and sort of like just runs with it, right?
Yes.
But that's usually more heroic. This gave me a bit more like, this is darker.
Yeah, this is a bit darker, and they will do all kinds of stuff. Like they'll decapitate politicians on stage. I mean, not for real, but have like people come out that looks like with sort of a fake head on top, and pretty much anything you could think of, they've probably done in one of these shows.
I have to say though, this is not at all what I associate with Norwegian black metal.
No, it's not Norwegian at all.
Circus. But yeah, I was away for like 5 minutes. I had to take
This is American, isn't it?
Yes.
I return and I see this. What the hell?
No, we're still in the general extreme metal part of the presentation. So we're not solid Norwegian black metal here.
Okay.
I wouldn't allow it anyways.
That's
But
good.
but yeah, Gwar is like it's sort of this hyper Americana, sort of like white boy paranoia type band. It's it's super fun. The problem is that all the original members are either dead or retired. So the band continues to exist, but they all keep like sort of the costumes, but none of the sort of original creators are there anymore. So it's I was glad to see it
that's kinda
before.
sweet.
It's like
It's like Slipknot.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the band of Theseus or whatever. Like
Yes.
you know the ship of Theseus.
The Ship of Theseus, yes.
Is
Well,
it
yeah,
still?
it's not the same band. I can tell you that much. It's I mean, when you lose these sort of founding members who have the creative talents, and you just get these sort of fanboys in, it never works. They could probably, they have the rights formally to the songs, but without the kind of founders, it's this applies to like political movements as well. Like when you lose some of these sort of founding people, and I mean the rights are maintained and the names are there, but
Sure.
it's just kind of a shell of what it was.
Uh-huh. But I mean, I think this is quite on the extreme end of the theater aspect. But I think the important aspect here is what you note down, the kayfabe from the wrestling
yes
world. That this is a bit of a, this is extreme and this is over the top, but it's there's an understanding usually in the audience that that's part of the expression here.
Yes, and they went to interviews dressed up in these costumes as well, so they sort of put in a lot of effort to keep the kayfabe. It's probably the best example. Rammstein I put in here as well, because a lot of their appeal, the music is catchy and the music is good, but they also put in a lot of work with this sort of pyromancy in their shows. I mean, I was going to go to a concert there, but the tickets are so expensive. When I look at these kind of stage show, I can see why. I mean, the amount of money that's blown on like fireworks, it's quite a bit. You could probably
I was going to go to one last year in Norway, but it got cancelled because of the Rona.
Right.
So, yeah.
I mean, people have probably seen these, some of these, but like the other parts with the kind of the extremeness of the metal here. If you click on the link with the audience interactions, I don't know if you did that one.
Is this the Wall of Death?
Yeah, the Wall of Death and like the sort of pits. So you could show that to the audience. This is another kind of aspect of metal that is quite interesting, at least from our perspective. If you look at the audience there, it's basically 100% white. And this is something I noticed like in almost pretty much every metal show that I go to, is that you have people on stage that are white and the audience is 100% white. It doesn't matter how big the crowd is. Like pretty much every head, every face I see is sort of a white face. And when you're seeing these people on stage, they're standing in like Viking clothes with Viking imagery, and they're like pumping their fists, and they're getting the audience to like pump their fists. You have to contain this stuff. This stuff has to be sort of people have to come out and say formally that, oh, we don't support this right-wing extreme stuff, because otherwise, like the general optics of it, it's reminiscing of something else. Let's just say that.
Do you have any comments from the Americans, Luke?
No, I mean, I think you got it. It's interesting how there's this narrative that's peddled all the time that, metal is for everyone and everybody's welcome here. And I mean, generally speaking, yes, but, tacitly, everybody kind of knows that like this is a white thing and mostly white people enjoy it. And it's not that it's necessarily, well, I guess I would say it's tolerated for the most part. Because I mean, I've been in groups and said, oh yeah, metal's for white people, and they're like, yeah, it really is. It's strange. It's kind of hypocritical to me that a lot of these groups come out and denounce all, the standard things, the list of talking points they've been given by someone.
Usually the labels, wouldn't you say?
I would say
politics,
so, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yes,
if you want to stay in business, you gotta.
And it is tricky because a lot of metal has gotten very political, and you get a lot of very vocal and influential people within the scene and just the industry that denounce a lot of this stuff and put down a lot of people. And I mean, again, bands that get blacklisted, and it's quite complicated, but I think you're right. I think this is largely a white thing.
I mean, it's enough to acknowledge really that it's really always going to be a majority white thing. But I mean, there are room for certain exceptions, I would say. I mean, there's a guy I used to work with. I'm not going to mention the name or the band, but he was in a band with Fenris from Jesus Christ, Dark Throne. And well, he's not ethnically Norwegian, but
he's not Italian, is he?
You could take him for an Italian, but
just
no, he's from. You actually could though mistake him for an Italian. He doesn't look very. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. But apparently, Varg Vikernes had. He told me that Varg had lobbied the record label to not include him and stuff, but which I thought was kind of funny, and he did as well. But I mean,
right.
I don't really care.
There's something. I mean, that paints a picture that there's
cool dude, he's in the Norwegian black metal band. He grew up in Norway. I don't mind.
Right. But there are some tensions regarding to this, even inside the sphere. Then,
yes, I would say so. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing major, and I mean, again, I'm pretty indifferent about the ethnicity of a lot of people in bands. Yeah, but I would say there's tension, whether spoken or unspoken. Yeah, it's there.
I'm just kind of, I guess, positively surprised about metal because I've been out of the scene for a while. But just to see that, with everything is just going woke, everything is just getting super gay and has to be like this Rainbow Coalition stuff. The metal community has been able to sort of maintain some core masculinity and some of the core of what it actually used to be. Although, I mean, it has been hit by the same wave as everything else, but it's not like every metal band is coming out with songs about being transgender. They still write metal for metal's sake. So I think it's like that, and maybe cage fighting that's sort of been able to remain somewhat masculine in the face of this
Yes.
stuff.
And this thing here, Wall of Death.
Yeah,
and
this is funny because
speaking of, I'm getting recommendations for Dungeon Synth in my YouTube here. So
Bass. Yeah,
if you guys are YouTube knows that when I look at metal, I want to listen to Dungeon Synth after. Apparently, if you guys haven't listened to it in the chat, or if you're listening to this later, you can give that a try. If you ever want to listen to what some people call video game soundtracks for games that never existed,
check it out
back in the day. All right, let's see what the huge Wall of Death is.
Yep.
I'm gonna stop there before it flags it, because
wholesome family entertainment.
Yeah, but I mean, this is one of the things that's going on. Usually, there will just be what you call a pit in these concerts. You could look at one of these other videos if you want to get a closer look at it, but where they just actually have a portion of the audience that is either moving in a circle, or they have a zone where you're kind of allowed to have these rougher physical interactions. Usually, they're not running around punching each other directly, but you're allowed to push and pull and jump into other people and sort of climb on top of other people. Just kind of escalate it. And like you see with the Wall of Death there, you have these kind of interactions between the band and the audience, where the band will sort of, almost like an army, where they will ask the audience to sort of split into two parts, and then they command them to basically run into each other at a certain point in the song. So I mean, it's really going back to the analogy of this is it looks like this sort of triumph of the will stuff.
Yep.
From from the outside, and the size of some of these pits as well. It's it's quite something to see.
I've never been to a gig that does it sort of orchestrated like that, but I've been, when I was a little younger, to some very cool mosh pit, spontaneous mosh pits during gigs. And it can be quite affable, like the mood between people. Like you just bump into each other all over, and like if you fall over, like someone's there to catch you, like instantaneously. It's hilarious.
So I've kind of seen both sides of it. When I saw Mayhem, it was a great atmosphere, and I'd say it was more spontaneous and people just kind of, pushing and shoving and doing the circle pit and shit. But yeah, I have gotten punched and kicked a few times, so it definitely happens.
But I mean, that's part of it, isn't it? Like I'm like, you don't go into a mosh pit expecting to be safe.
Yes,
I mean, you're doing it because there's an element of danger to it. It's like, it's sort of like a ritual kind of thing where you can get hurt, quote unquote. You can have danger in a safe environment.
Yes, I guess where I'm coming from, like the scene here is very rough, so you definitely get more just overt violence.
Oh, okay.
So it definitely happens. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, it never happens."
Americans are rougher. I'm just saying that, like,
yes,
to the Norwegians listening there, because I've been there and I've been to concerts in Norway and America. Like they go harder than us, like quite a bit. You're in for a bit of a ride there if you go to one of those shows. But yeah, let's see some of the other type of antics that go on. Like some of that stuff can be fun, and it can be some camaraderie with property destruction. Like you have the standard, smashing the guitar, or like they smash the instruments, so they will usually, hopefully, not destroy too many other things. But sometimes the audience will kind of encroach on the scene, and they'll break down the sort of fences and so forth. It's not always a part of the show, but the crowd will just get so rowdy that it's almost inevitable to have this happening. Like with the sexuality angle, like it's not as much, I guess, if you look at sort of death metal, but with some of these more hardcore punk type of outfits where they'll try to have some more nudity, perhaps. Like Rammstein would sometimes have like these sex toys on stage that it will just shoot like squirt water out of or something. I mean, you've probably had some of these shows where they've had people have sex on stage. Even some of the more extreme cases there with scatology, that's on the bullet point with G.G. Allen and some of these. People can just search that stuff up if they're interested. I don't really want to go into.
I'm not very interested into that.
not really.
Yeah, like at your own whatchamacallit. But yeah, G.G. Allen is pretty funny, but I'm not very into his music.
What I feel here is that this feels very... I'm sure some of these aren't, but this feels very American.
I mean, with the
Rammstein isn't, but there's something about, and I suppose we'll get into it, there's something about the Nordic black metal, or the metal scene in general, that is not as degenerate. Is that the word?
Well, in my experience, going to these black metal concerts, you're just supposed to show up there and be miserable. Like you're just supposed to stand still and watch the show.
Because life is miserable and we don't see the sun for half the year. So get with the program.
But of course, I mean, the mosh pits, at least, I've seen in a lot of Norwegian concerts. But it's been my understanding, like with some of these true Norwegian black metal bands, that you're just supposed to stand there with your arms crossed and.
Well, sure, but I was thinking about the sexuality and etc.
Well, you have the cum shots, like the band with Kristoffer Schau.
Fair enough.
I guess.
Would you say that's like hard extreme metal?
Well, that's more of a punk rock band, right?
Yeah, yes. And punk is one thing. I mean, I would expect it in punk.
Just straight rock, or with the slight punk.
I think it's a sort of hardcore punk, but like, I mean, from a normie perspective, it's I think it's very difficult to distinguish between these things. So I mean, I added a bit of that in there, but it's like you said, it's probably rarer in these sort of like pure metal pure metal bands, and then more of like a sort of punk shock rock type thing. But there's some overlap there.
Yeah, I Dark Throne stopped playing gigs in 1996, unlike many black metal acts. And Fenris cites this sort of circus-like thing as the reason. Like they're just a studio band, and there's not much gimmickry there at all. So I can totally see why.
Yeah, that's why they're one of the best, if not the best, black metal band.
Yeah, I mean, Fenris and Nocturnal Cult are really cool dudes from my vantage point anyway. Like Nocturnal Culto just moved to Hedmark in like 93. He lives out in the forest, and Fenris, he lives in Oslo, but he doesn't travel, and I mean, he gets interviewed sometimes, but he doesn't like live for fame or anything.
He's the main focus in that documentary you posted, isn't he?
Yeah, they follow Fenris to this gay art exhibition in Stockholm and stuff by Bjarne Melgaard. I mean, I don't like his art at all, but that's a separate issue. Fenris is really cool. Like I've seen him in Oslo plenty of times, just I went to a metal gig at Brits, for instance, and I've also seen him DJ house and techno records around town. And this just seems like a chill dude. Unlike perhaps Gall, who like he gets asked in interviews like, "What's the main inspiration for your music?" And he sits in this dimly lit room and takes 15-second artful pauses before just replying like Satan. But I don't want to.
I feel like he's chilled out in recent years, but he's a fucking weird. Gall, I feel like he's gotten a bit more normal in recent years, but yeah, he's a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, he is. I remember going to Bergen and hearing some stories about him, but
I can only imagine.
Yeah, but I don't know too much about Gall, so I'm not gonna like make blanket statements. But yeah.
No, he's a bit of a degenerate, actually. I think he is. So. I think he's gay. So
he is gay.
Yeah. He is gay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I heard because
and
we
a painter,
went to,
I think.
Yes, he paints now and has an art gallery. Yeah, with his partner. Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean that's going to be difficult considering how like this sort of you could probably use that in the 90s or something that kind of the gayness is a part of the extreme identity, but the way the culture is now, it's like that's kind of what's considered the kind of mainstream safe thing to do.
Do you think he has transitioned into we were talking last week about the sort of the homosexual voting bloc, so to speak, of the high class homosexual,
based homo
who appreciates art and male companionship?
Probably, I wouldn't put it behind him.
Of course, I didn't mention
you gotta appreciate though. It's pretty metal to be openly gay in the metal scene.
Well, fair enough.
Yes, yeah, I'll give him that. And
like
I thought his new record was good.
Yeah, wasn't Rob Halford in Judas Priest? It's also openly gay. Yeah.
I don't think he was at the beginning. I think that was sort of he was doxxed with his sexuality. But of course, I mean, if you know what you're looking for, that element has just always been in Judas Priest.
Oh yes.
If he's running around with the chains and the whips and all that kind of stuff, it was always there if you knew what you were looking for.
Rumors about it for 20 years, and then he finally said, "I'm gay." Yeah, it's like, who's surprised?
I guess by the way, to round off with Gall, I've never read Karl Ove Knausgård, but he wrote like this huge series of books about himself.
Yep.
With he basically used the Austrian painter title, but in Norwegian.
About the book is called My Struggle.
Yeah, his biography, but he's a good friend of Gall apparently. So they sort of
I have read not all,
literate
but quite a lot
art.
of those books. Yeah.
What's
Is it
the
any good?
point?
I mean,
Sorry, what?
it's
What's the point of
it's-
these books? Like, I saw that they were in the paper and everything. I didn't understand what it was about.
Well, it's basically his life, but he uses, like, I mean, he elaborates and sort of artfully sort of embellishes, I suppose, is the way to do it. But it's as someone who really appreciates who appreciated and did a stream on I'm blanking on his name. Come on.
Hamsun?
Hobson, yes. I see a lot of similarities in his sort of writing style and the way that he presents a character as a narrator and as the point of view character, and sort of laying bare the inner thoughts and trials and tribulations. That being said, it can get a bit masturbatory at times, in terms of, like, not literally. If I remember correctly, it might actually literally get that at sometimes when he gets into his teens, because he's laying it all out there.
But you kind of have to if you're going to write a book like that.
But in a sense, that's also what's interesting about it. It's a straight up, here's an artful retelling of my life, the good and the bad, the ups and the downs, and he goes hard into sort of the meaning and sort of maybe the meaninglessness of growing up in a modern life throughout that. So if it's a huge, like, massive, incredible work of art, I don't know, but it was an interesting read.
Yep. Right, but to finish up the slide here, of course, I forgot to mention the blood there, but that's something that's that you actually do see with some of these black metal bands, whether they try to use like the pig's blood that they try to spit on the audience, or like with the earlier Mayhem contest, they had the Swedish lead singer try to cut himself on stage. Of course, that's not been the sort of persistent feature of it, but it's something they experimented with for a period. So I don't. Did they do that, Luke, in the American black metal scene? Was there any sort of pig's blood involved?
There was a lot of blood. We knew a guy. He lived north of where I was, and he had as a family member that was a butcher and would get animal parts and blood and all kinds of shit. And it was pretty cool. I mean, they'd wear like white shirts and stuff and get blood all over them, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was cool.
Yep. Then I think we could move to the next slide. So
here we go.
I put this one together here. I feel like, my experience, at least with the metal community, that it almost feels like an inverse bell curve, where it's like the majority are either like
it's the midwit graph, isn't it?
This is the midwit graph, or the bell curve. It's upside down.
Yeah.
Where you either like you have the based kind of caveman, or you have like the kind of smart artist, and you have like the sort of minority of these kind of midwit mainstream opinion people in the middle there. Like,
let me find the midwit real quick, because it's pretty much that.
What's the rationale? Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So you basically have, in like political thought, the idea is that you'll have the lower end of the IQ spectrum and the higher end of the IQ spectrum agreeing on usually right-wing topics or right-wing points, but for different reasons, obviously. Like, this is the North FC, I'm not racist, I just don't like them. And this is the high IQ, sort of a deep philosophical understanding about, a nation's culture, etc., etc. And then the midwit, where the bell curve of sort of the liberal current order will accept sort of everything that's thrown at them, and therefore construct the mainstream narrative that's obviously false.
Yes.
Sorry, I just had to indulge
So,
in memes
yeah,
for a
yeah,
second.
but it's actually good because I don't think everybody would understand the joke otherwise.
Yep.
Not everybody is a sort of compulsive memers, but it looks like the guy on the left in the picture there is some random wignat, but it's actually not. This is actually Phil Anselmo, like the lead singer of
Yes.
Pantera, who did this at some concerts. So he is like the sort of cave. I mean, he's not very smart. He's like this kind of caveman type, based caveman
He
guy,
spent
and
half of his life on heroin.
yes, it's just kind of how he is. Then I have like Dave Mustaine. I mean, he's not sort of like this kind of PhD super genius, but I think of him in like the smarter curve of the metal community.
I'm just wondering why you used Kirk Hammett instead of James Hetfield in the mid category.
Maybe I could have used Hetfield, but I felt
they both work. They both
Yeah, they
inspire
both
the same feeling.
Sure.
I think Hammett's been a bit more active on Twitter, as far as I can see, with the sort of Drumpf
okay.
Bush stuff. So that's sort of where I have it from. Like Hetfield has like been in interviews saying that he doesn't want to talk about politics and he tries to sort of be apolitical. But like with Lars Ulrich and Hammett, it's like a little bit more sort of like this sort of Drumpf thing. And in one sense, I'm not even sure if it's completely correct because like Kirk Hammett is not white. I'm sorry to say it, but it's like he like with some of these people, if like Dee Snider or Gene Simmons or somebody comes out and say some of this sort of like fuck Drumpf stuff, it's because they're not from our tribe. Let's just say, put it that way. Like you have the what I like to call the J Rock, the other type of J Rock, who like bands like Kiss, for instance, like it's like a fully sort of commercial Talmudic band, basically. And if they have opinions that's like pro global homo, it's just because it's in their interest. But I mean, with Dave Mustaine here, he's sort of just gone like full Alex Jones. If you listen to the last albums that he's written, he's gone from this sort of like partially politically interested in like global what do you call geopolitics, and interested in sort of economics and so on, and then just gone like full Alex Jones with these latest albums. And like, I mean, he's not this sort of super articulate PhD guy, but he sort of knows how to articulate himself. You could click on this sort of Mustaine on Glam link there, where he has this sort of really funny quotes that I wanted to just have on stream.
Pull it up.
Mustaine is definitely more self-aware, I think, than a lot of the other mainstream metal artists. And I think that, his statements come off a bit better than, especially the Metallica people.
I mean, he wasn't always like that. He was quite rowdy when he was younger, but he seems to, sober up a little bit and shown that he's actually quite smart.
He's aged. Yeah, he's aged pretty well.
I'll tune up the volume.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about the glam scene in LA in the early 80s?
I'd said a long time ago, glam stood for gay LA metal. And, I mean, if you have to dress up like a chick on stage to get people to come and check you out, you gotta ask yourself, first off, you got unresolved issues, and second off, is your music even really that good?
All right, that was pretty good.
I thought this is like the perfect statement. It's sort of like, I mean, he's been sort of like low-key homophobic his entire career, basically. So you have like these little nuggets like that coming out. But this sort of statement that if you have to dress up like a chick to get attention, first of all, you got issues. Second of all, is your content really that good? If Philosophy Tube, where I think about like ContraPoints or some of these Demon Mom, these kind of like trans YouTubers, like, you have mental issues. Number one. Second of all, your content's not that great. But he said it first. So, like, I mean, you have these people like these kind of chats like Mustaine and like, Dio. You don't have to show the clip there, but they sort of they put a lot of effort into resisting the mainstreaming of this, the mainstreaming of metal, and they want it to be a kind of underground, more kind of honest, artistic movement there. But there's always this kind of influence that's coming in. I've seen a lot of articles. I didn't have any for the presentation, but it does show up when I've read metal magazines and these other New York Times, where they'll do these occasional pieces on the whiteness, the implicit kind of whiteness, and the colonizer mentality implicit in metal and that stuff. But it doesn't stick the way that it seems to stick on other communities. as I mentioned previously.
Do you
I don't know
think
about
the decentralized nature of sort of the all of these subgenres sort of help defending from that?
It's an interesting question. I wish I kind of knew the formula for how it manages to do so, but the decentralized stuff helps. The fact that it's so kind of cowboyish, I think, helps.
Right.
Where it's like, you have these people who are just not interested in taking shit from other people, and they're not tied to, like, they have to make a lot of money or they have to look a certain way. They basically pride themselves on pushing themselves away from the rest of society, and you can't really try to appeal to them with saying that, if you're a good guy, you should support trans rights or something. It doesn't work that way. It never worked on them, so I don't know why this should this should work on them either.
To me, it's the centralized nature of, especially black metal. In my experience, we all kind of pay homage and respect to, the original scene, and kind of try to model ourselves after that example that was set by them. And I can't think of any, it's got to be the centralized kind of opinions and shots that are called, because in my experience, the more decentralized scenes and just anything in culture, they tend to be more susceptible to subversion. You can just pick off kind of one at a time. I'm not totally sure, though.
Okay, so it's actually the opposite in that the subgenres are very purely defined. That makes it harder to attack them, maybe. Yeah,
that's
because
my
they're
experience.
so specific. Yeah,
well,
that would make sense.
We'll get into it later, I guess, but the question around Varg and whether or not his music is good is definitely a make or break kind of issue. And there's a lot of people. Yeah,
I talked about Dungeon Synth, and he has like his, what do you call, like the prison albums, I suppose.
Oh yeah,
are pretty much Dungeon Synth because he didn't have access to anything else than like a keyboard, I think.
Well, even the early stuff when he's making black metal that's purely inspired by, role playing games and stuff like that. Yeah. There's a fair number of people that, and this is really what I can't stand. It's what a lot of other people I think within the scene couldn't stand, is the people that pretend like it's shit music because they don't like the guy making it.
Right.
And I remember we went to a bar one night and they had a sticker on, I guess it was over the bar, where it said, "Oh, nice Burzum shirt." What did it say? It's something like, "So you like shitty Nazi bands," or something like that. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And of course, we ended up getting banned from there. But
you can't get away from, I think, the fact, like, listening to the music, you can't say that it's, it's not good, or that it's not a work of art. You can disagree with I suppose, the expression, but I can't say that it's invalid,
Yeah, and that's where I'm coming from, and that's where I guess we were coming from as a scene. And I think it's part of why we were able to gatekeep so well is, if you don't want to listen to Burzum, if you don't want to listen to Talk, any of these groups, you're just not going to get along with us. So.
Right.
No inclusion, but it's just the way it should be.
Yeah, it is the way it should be.
Yeah.
And I mean,
that's sorry, Luke.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Fenris in the documentary we mentioned earlier, he sort of laments the making it into a trend, which I can understand. But he also says, of course, it's out of their hands now. Like, anyone might sit down and appreciate black metal, but sure, it is self-limiting to a large degree. But I just recalled staying in Brooklyn in 2013, I think, and I was wearing a Burzum shirt, I believe, and just like this Brooklyn hipsters coming up, cool shirt, man. Just like, I mean, it's kind of a trend thing as well.
It is. It is funny to see a lot of, celebrities now have started wearing black metal merch, which, of course, it hurts my eyes. But it's one of those things where if you know, and, I've had people say like, "Oh, that's a sick Burzum shirt." And I have, it's a quite what is it, subversive Burzum shirt. And I've had people say that it looks cool. I really like that design, whatever. And then I've had people say like, get the fuck out of here, blah, blah. I mean, it just depends. It depends. It's tricky.
By the way, I remember this Norwegian site quite a few, maybe 10, 15 years ago. They made they made like random black metal shirts with fake band names, just like with the black metal style, and the band names would say like hårföner, which means hair dryer, hair blower, or whatever, and like Winkelsliper, and for the Norwegian audience,
like various power tools and
just like, and they would actually sell these, I think, and make a buck, just like, oh cool, a random black metal shirt, I'll get it, and it's just like fraud.
Yeah, I can imagine they sold very well overseas.
Yeah.
You gotta get those obscure characters in there as well. That sells even better.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So do we want to move on to, or do we have any comments more on the politics of metal? I suppose this image, I feel, covers it very well.
we talked about the demographics earlier, and a lot of this resisting mainstream and this stuff. So we can just keep going. Let's see. This is the one that I wanted to. It's a bit of a sting at Denmark here, and of course I know that's oversimplifying, but they have some bands like King Diamond and so on that have gained some international recognition. But I don't think Denmark is a part of the cool kids club in terms of
they're too continental for our tastes, I think.
Yes. So, I mean, assume if there are some fans in the audience, it's like, oh, why'd you leave out this band or whatever? I mean, I just, I put the ones that I think in the order of how well they're known outside of the country. And
why did you leave out Dissection and Bathory in the Swedish category?
Yeah, of course. That's how I always left out some bands. I think Sweden had too many already, basically.
Sweden have done very well on that.
Bathory are too cool for this list, honestly.
Yeah.
This is the export overview, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what's, Sweden to me has always impressed me quite a bit in terms of their musical output. On the Sweden stream, I think Leo Borealis talked about how they have like musical unions and everything. So I think they take that stuff a lot more seriously in Sweden than we do here.
And in sort of mainstream circles, they've done very well with the various, bands being recognized internationally and winning a lot of music competitions. Not that we really care about them, but the rest of the world seems to like whatever Sweden is selling.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, with Norway, you have a lot of this kind of gate kept in crowd of the black metal art scene. That's this very this kind of dark, bit more Generation X type thing. But in Sweden, it's like, oh no, we just made like good death metal, high quality, high production stuff that can compete with anything, regardless of whether it's part of some type of movement or something. So I don't want to like throw shade on black metal or anything.
Now, I've talked earlier about, I want to do like just this for fun for a moment, because I come from as I said, the only route to this was through power metal. And I want to ask, because I've talked about pipelines before, is there a Sabaton to Dissident Right pipeline? In the same way that I theorized that there's a Hearts of Iron 4 to Dissident Right pipeline.
I'd like to think so, but I've been interacted with some of these metal fans. It seems like I think you find Sabaton if you're interested in metal and history, and you're kind of already there. You have a lot of these.
So it's already there. It doesn't lead you to anything.
No, I mean, Sabathon's not inherently. I don't think it's inherently dissonant political in that way.
No, I don't think so either. But I thought that maybe the imagery would be enough. But I think you're right. I think it's just, oh, that's a cool samurai sword, bro.
Yeah, you have a lot of these. I mean, they're not weebs, but like we like to, joke about the soy jack, right? This kind of, he's holding his hands up, his mouth open, and in every demographic, whether it's like the Zoomers or the Millennials, it's like with the Zoomers, the Millennials, like, oh, Marvel is like, oh, Thor and like the Captain America and whatever.
I suppose if we're going to keep using the wrestling language, I suppose Sabaton attracts a lot of marks.
A lot of marks,
Yes.
but you have a demographic. I've noticed them, especially in like Norway, of like these kind of adolescent man children that are like between 40 to 45, who just sit and gush out about like this sort of World War II memorabilia stuff. Like you have these sort of men's magazines that used to have like titty pictures and nudes, and they've gone away from that to just be like World War II magazines, because it's the sort of same demographic of like, oh, it's the Tiger tanks. It's like, oh my God, they just sit and gush about this sort of tanks and.
It's like
General
Hitler's
Rommel
new secret weapon.
Oh, Hitler's secret weapon
special. Yeah,
Exactly.
I've seen those.
SS uniforms. I think that's kind of the demographic for Sabathon. I don't want to be pessimistic, but
well, yeah, and I try not to come off as mean when I say this, but most of the people that I've met with Sabaton merchandise, and they just sound kind of autistic when they talk about the band and talk about their taste in music and stuff like that. I mean, I respect what they're doing. And I think it's better than a lot of the just dreck out there in the scene, but it's definitely not for me.
Sure.
So I just wanted to touch on. I
suppose I've just got a bit of a bleak view on like just anything depicting anything heroic has the chance of dragging someone out of the mire that we're in. Because
it is difficult.
Because the standard is so low these days that just a morsel of something is a ray of hope.
Yeah, no, it has the imagery, but I don't think it has the kind of the content or swaying people to be quote unquote red pilled. It's not that easy. I think we should do a stream on that at one point, maybe like the paths to the red pill and what directions that can take. I want to just
almost says Sabaton peaked with Carol as Rex. It went downhill since. Well, of course you would. I think you're a Swede, so of course you would say that. Because that's the last time they sang about Sweden, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah,
I haven't been paying attention too much. They've been doing like World War I and II stuff, haven't they?
Is that Karl den Store? Karl the Great?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
That's the album that's all about Sweden. Or Swedish history.
Yep. So I just wanted to go check out a little bit on...
By the way, he was defeated at Fredriksten Festning in Halden. Oh, well, that is German.
He's German, I'm sorry. I made a jab, but I missed.
Entschuldigung. Right. I wanted to touch on Finland a little bit as well, because they're a little bit overlooked, especially like the two top bands here, like Children of Bodom, I guess RIP to Alexei, but this was a truly like unique band. It was one of the bands that actually got me into listening to extreme metal, where it was started by like these very young guys, headed by like this guy Alexei, who's this very little guy who was classically trained as a violinist, basically at very early age, and he took that skill sort of into the extreme metal and created this kind of like hybrid Yngwie Malmsteen trash death symphonic metal stuff that it's just the first albums are just so full of energy, and it's so sort of like all over the place, but it's hard, often imitated, never recreated. Basically, there's so many people who try to copy that style and they just can't do it. And he himself later in the career was not able to copy his own style. He was just sort of went, I think after the fourth, the kind of Hate Crew Death Roll album, it just went downhill from there. I didn't bother paying attention to it. It became the kind of 2000s kind of new metal style, like the Trivium, the band that's called Trivium, and you have the Bullet for My Valentine. I don't know if you noticed this, Luke, into like the 2000s, the 2010s, where it seems like every metal band with like 4 members started sounding like the same band, where you had like partially.
I think Luke is away for a moment.
He's a little bit away. I'll ask him.
Yeah, save the question for when he gets back.
Save the question. So that's for Children of Bodom. Their lead singer,
Can I just say? Well, we have the opportunity that I meant the Karl Tolte, Karl the 12th. So, little autistic aside, I just got to...
just in case we get any comments, yeah, thanks.
I got to correct myself.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
Chill out.
Yeah.
No, but no, I'm not joking. We're gonna get comments about that if you don't correct yourself.
I think
Luke,
there's
I
enough
see
to draw
you're
on.
back. Ludwig had a question for you.
Yeah, I talked about like the trajectory, if you're familiar with Children of Bodom, and it seemed to be a trajectory of a lot of these bands going into the 2000s and the 2010s. If you had like a band with 4 or 5 members, like the standard sort of 2 guitars, 1 bass, 1 drum, they all ended up sounding like the same band in the 2000s, like with the Trivium and Bullet for My Valentine and a lot of these. There was this, at least in my impression, this homogenization of metal that went on. Is that your impression as well?
Yeah, I would say so. It kind of started in the late '90s, and there were a few like standout kind of bands and albums, but it's like new metal and, like you said, groups like Bullet for My Valentine, Slipknot. I mean, something about that sound, it just really took over. I don't really know where it started. It's kind of hard to say, but
So
definitely.
for a layman like me, is that all of the like mid 2000s? Why did she leave me metal?
I would say so. You get really
Hate My
kind of
Parents stuff.
angsty.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Do we have any other bands here we want to talk about, or should we move on to? I think are we hitting on Varg next? Is that it?
Perhaps. I think the Finnish scene is really cool, and I think it's underappreciated, especially the underground stuff. Yeah, just because Sweden went down a more polished, developed death metal route with good production and a really heavy focus on just riffs, and Finland kind of went in the opposite direction, from my understanding. It was a really raw, really low quality production, heavy distortion. I mean, indistinguishable like vocals and percussion and stuff like that. It's really great. I don't know how you'd pronounce it. I say Beherit. It's that, and I don't know. I'll be honest. I listened to a lot of the Nazi bands out of Finland. It's like Goat Moon it's just good music again, especially if you're into the more raw kind of black metal sound.
I noticed in the Finnish list here, there are a lot of bands that were pretty big when I went to like, is it high school? Yeah, Children, or even before, like Children of Bodom, Nightwish, Him.
Yeah, I'll say all of these sort of melodic bands that I've touched on in any metal I've listened to are here from Finland, like Ainsiferum, Children of Bodom, Nightwish, Sonata Arctica, So that's more. I think that they've been able to sort of slide more mainstream with that sound.
Yes.
But then at the same time, Luke, you mentioned they've also done something different in sort of the underground scene. It seems.
I guess, yes, it's more underground, I would say. And I mean, like Werewolf is a record label out of Finland that's doing a lot of really cool stuff right now.
Just as an aside, by the way, Children of Bodom is named after a really grisly real life story from the 50s or 60s, probably. So, yeah, if you're into sort of investigating, it's not cozy reading at all, but it's a murder case in Finland, really controversial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Have you covered Nightwish yet?
We didn't cover it. We touched on it, but I just mentioned it. Did you want to talk about Nightwish specifically?
Children of Bodom. I think Nightwish was also another band that everybody tried to copy, but nobody was able to recreate.
I mean, Nightwish themselves haven't been able to copy it.
No, that's it's the same with Children of Bodom. It's like they weren't even able to copy their own sound eventually. I mean, you have the bands like the Evanescence and the it's called like Earth something. A lot of these bands, like they created the model for like the female lead singer symphonic metal style, but nobody was able to really do as well as they did in the beginning. So it's quite something. I don't have a whole lot more on Finland except Lordi. I guess that's a kind of interesting aside on there, where they
that's the guys from the Eurovision, isn't it?
They actually won like the Eurovision Song Contest with this kind of shock rock costume, gimmicky,
horrible stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't great sort of musically, but it was an interesting time where like this stuff was really mainstream enough to the point where like they could win the majority votes on the Eurovision just on, I guess, on sort of the
shock
gimmick
value.
factor.
Yeah, because they were all in like orc masks and
they are
like
Gwar,
but they're playing like glam rock, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it is like a Gwar clone. Basically, they took some of that thunder, those types of costumes, and played more of like this. The music itself was very commercial, so that's why it worked for them.
There's some suggestions from the chat. Google to talk field. I can't say that, but that's apparently a truly splendid.
Something like that.
Monophthalmo says Winter Sun. I think I've listened to those. Let me check for a moment. Winter Sun. Yeah, I've listened to Winter Sun. I'm not sure if it's my kind of thing, but it's very melodic.
So we then have to take the trip by Norway. I mean, we're going to cover a lot of these other bands, but like the only sort of outlier there that we're not going to cover is really like Turbo Negro or Turbo Negro, if we can say that on the
hopefully we can say that
on the stream. I mean, it is a band, so you can't help, you know.
That's the name of the band. I'm sorry, Susan.
Sorry, Susan. And
they started out with an even worse name, by the way, but whatever.
I know. I mean, you know, they also went for the shock factor, and like the lead singer is dead now. I think he died of some alcoholism or something. It's probably to the best for them because they, you know, it's hard for them to kind of continue with the kind of shtick that they had with the climate, because that kind of cancel culture that exists now. So
yeah,
they exist in a sort of perfect time space for that to emerge and to calm down a little bit later. I'll mention it later as well, but a lot of this this sort of Norwegian music, both the more like Turbo Negro and the more mainstream black metal, at least to me, it seems to have been popularized through like Bam Margera and Jackass. Is that your impression, Luke?
You mean black metal, or
no? Like you're more like like Turbo Negro, this kind of Norwegian rock. It's like Dimmu Borgir, you know, the symphonic black metal stuff. Like some of that was used in this kind of Bam Margera, Jackass style videos.
That's really interesting. It wouldn't surprise me. I know for a fact that music really caught on as like YouTube soundtrack music. Basically.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's kind of funny because I've never thought about like specifically Bam Margera, because I know he was into a lot of those bands. Oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about that.
Yes, another person we don't who's not with us anymore, but at least that's what I remember, is that he would have those people on his show. Like he had you had the Jackass, but he had his own show with his family and everything. Yes. But I don't remember too much of. But he had some of these punk bands like the 69 Eyes, and you know, he popularized some of the bands from Finland as well, like him and
interesting.
That's as much as I can remember. Maybe someone in the chat can elaborate.
Come on, chat.
Come on, chat. So let's take a look now at the true Norwegian black metal.
Yes.
Yep.
Let's get into it.
So yeah, here I just sort of put some bullet points in trying to identify like how to understand this genre. It's lo-fi, I guess, is the first point that's kind of central to black metal, along with the kind of gatekeeping that the, you know, black metal, basically the scene wanted to not be commercial, and they saw that death metal was going in a very commercial direction where it was being played on MTV, and they did not want to have music videos played on air. They didn't want to be played on the radio. They wanted to stay underground, like permanently, just 6 feet under. And so they you know, gone with this kind of necro sound that is having the production and the quality of the sound is going to be as bad as possible.
Did they call it corpse sound?
I think it was necro black metal.
Is it necro sound? Okay, yeah.
No.
We should perhaps start by mentioning Mayhem as well, because they were the first bona fide Norwegian black metal band for sure.
Yeah, we're getting into it.
I would claim. Okay, maybe I'm jumping the horse or whatever.
No problem. It's all interconnected. I just wanted to kind of do a bit of an overview of how to identify, the black metal oryx.
Yeah.
The high pitched screaming, I guess, is different, where the death metal go more for the macho growls, and the kind of less technical emphasis. It's a little bit like punk rock in that it's they want to try to avoid making it too technical and having more the focus on the atmosphere and the authenticity. See, the corpse makeup is also a staple, as you can see here. The picture on the left is of Immortal. They were formerly named the Black Death, I think.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, they weren't the first band on the scene, but I think they have a very sort of iconic version of this, of the black and white face makeup. With I mean, they got everything there. They have like the braces with the nails on and the medieval weaponry, black and white photos as well. So I think, this for the early scene, the picture is a little bit too well produced, but it's pretty close to what they were going for, because of course you have to have everything black and white. You can't have the photos be well done either. So everything has to kind of deliberately look lo-fi, rough. Let's see.
I mean, the photo you have here is quite LARPy. I mean, I guess that's an essential part of it anyway. But this looks a bit too much like cheap toys they're holding there. But okay, maybe I'm sprigging out.
Yeah, they should have had the lower quality, more pixels.
I think Immortal too, they kind of made an identity for themselves, being a bit more LARPy, in my opinion.
Yeah, because that is I recognize the Immortal like makeup on the guy in the middle. So that is Immortal there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All you have to do is watch the music video for "Call of the Winter Moon."
Yeah, that's funny.
They're
not taking themselves super seriously, I think.
No, we got Abbott in the center there, the lead singer.
This is this famous, one. Yeah, I remember this one. They're just sort of like frolicking around a castle. Yeah,
it's awesome.
He's famous for his crab walk there with the guitar. So thematically, they stay within. It's considered like it's very closely tied to paganism or anti-Christianity, though there was a sort of brief split as to where you have like the pagan camp or like the sort of more Satanist, like just sort of nihilist camp of it. It's just inherently like gatekeeping, inherently antisocial, and really just trying to be extreme for the sake of being extreme. I think that was especially true for Euronymous and some of the early Mayhem people, where that it just became like we need to just be evil for the sake of evil. You could hear it in some of these interviews that they gave. So that's the kind of image they try to sell people with. And at the time, I think it actually scared a lot of people. This was not like commonplace in Norway at the time.
Yeah, I think it certainly hit a nerve. When I try to remember back to those times, I was probably born a bit too late, but
well, that's definitely my perspective as an outsider, is that it kind of went against a lot of the cultural norms, and it scared a lot of people, and especially as the wacky church burnings began.
Well, sure. When they started doing a bit of trolling, as we say, but
so the last point,
it's also that they must have somehow scared the right people, in a sense. It's not just that the conservative Christians got scared. I think the liberals also got scared. I think that's what made it a true danger.
Yes, and that's part of why I find black metal so interesting, is it did kind of strike a nerve with people that, at least historically, I would have thought they would have put themselves behind it, in a sense, or supported it as like a deconstructive force. But
it's one of those things where, like, if you're going to get political about it, do you want to, do you ride the tiger, or you're an accelerationist, or do you burn it all down? And I think the answer from the black metal crowd is that you burn it all down and build something in the ashes.
Yes.
Euronymous was an accelerationist, I think. Yes. Like for some of these interviews, it's very kind of accelerationist, his views. Like he seemed to want to radicalize as many people as possible, but
I would say so.
I do not think that. I mean, it scared a lot of people, I guess, in the cultural elite and normies, quote unquote. But I don't think that the government ever looked at this as a kind of serious threat, because they would have just shut it down immediately. Like, this was allowed to exist in its own little space because these were just kind of like teenagers doing art stuff that was kind of extreme, and it was the 90s. But if they had caught wind that this was like actually like resourceful people, like say paramilitary or something, I think it would have been shut down pretty much immediately. So it was allowed to exist for a time just to scare people. I put the last point there. It's like, if this is a kind of outsider art, or if it's just like the peak Generation X type of cultural movement. I mean, for those of you who don't know, like, outsider art is really, I mean, a lot of the art that's selling for a lot of money is sold predicated on the idea that it's not really what the art is itself, but it's the people who made the art. So if you have someone who was in an insane asylum for 40 years and they made an art collection, then you could sell that at a high price. Or you found some guy who lives in the mountains with like 70 IQ, who's kind of a feral man who kind of shits and pisses on a canvas, and you can sell that to rich people for, $5 million or something. And there's some similarities to that and to black metal. I mean, not to try to tarnish it, but I think that it attracts the same people.
It's part of the image building, isn't it?
The kind of middle class who longs for authenticity. They live in this very safe bubbles, and they can't find any of this kind of like rough natural aggression or any of this kind of authentic things, and so they have to have these insane people perform for them to. At least that's kind of my take on the appeal of black metal.
Yeah, I guess I have a much more romantic view of outsider art. I think there is something profound about it when you find someone that has no real artistic education or training or knowledge, but they create something at least evocative, right? Because to me, I think of black metal as outsider art, especially, because you had teenagers that had no idea how to play guitar, and they built their entire style around just teaching themselves chords and teaching themselves, sounds and rhythms and stuff like that. And they managed to make something, I think, very interesting. So,
absolutely, I gotta agree with that, and I pick up on some sort of romantic themes in it as well, for sure. And if we can get into it later, I want to talk more about my associations with the music, like the pure music in itself. But I think there's also something to what Ludwig Path says there, for sure. I mean, I grew up, I don't want to specify it too much, perhaps, but between Kolbotn and Ski. And Kolbotn is, and then they're quite close to each other as well. Kolbotn is where Dark Throne is from, and Ski is where Mayhem started. And so, like, when I went to school, people, like guys, would go to buy kebabs in the same building where Mayhem recorded Death Crush, and Dark Throne recorded their second and third records. There was a studio in the cellar there. So anyway, my point is that I'm really well acquainted with the local area there, and it's definitely sort of a suburb to Oslo. With there's not really sort of a thriving folk music scene or anything. It's kind of I don't want to say it lacks an identity totally, because I was a local romantic before I was a nationalist, but so I kind of like that place. But there is probably a connection between where those bands started out and sort of the point that Ludwig Path made better than I am.
Yeah, I think it's very well put by both of you. I was sorry to sound like I'm poo-pooing on outsider art. I mean, I'm actually quite a fan myself. I just
go ahead. It's
a little bit cynical.
I really don't care.
I'm a little bit cynical on how like outsider art is being marketed to middle class people. I just see it way too much that they try to sell these people in as like hobos or like whatever, there's always something wrong with them. I mean, you see it in music as well, like with these some of these like rap artists or like the people who committed like the XX extension, or like these guys who were just kind of like out of their minds, just drugged out, and they make this kind of crap, music. What's this new style? This kind of like noise rap, bumble rap stuff. It has some of the same. It has a bit of the same selling point, that you're kind of selling, insanity to middle class people. I'm just a little bit cynical about it, but I think we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I just want to make the point that they were seeking authenticity. Like there was this sort of primordial Norwegian thing that we all share, in spite of the local. What I said, like there's not a folk music scene there, but there is the national spirit that you can tap into, and Fenris, for instance, and all of the black metal scene make references to Taylor Kittelsen, who we got into on the
explicitly.
Stream. Yeah, explicitly. So we can get.
I think
more
that's
into
something that in the content and the paganism, anti-Christianity is part of the truth that they're hitting on. It's one of those, yes, it might be outsider art, and regardless of what you feel about outsider art in general, there's something about when sort of that magic happens and you get something like that almost fully formed in the first version. Like the scene didn't really have to go very far after that to sort of reinvent or rediscover itself, the core ideas of what the people were trying to express, even though, as you said, they had no musical training, were so ingrained in their bones, so to speak, that they were able to convey these thoughts of, modern life is sort of throwing us out to sea without an oar, and all that's around us is porn and McDonald's, and the last time when we go into the woods we feel like there's a connection to something, and maybe Christianity didn't integrate as well as we thought.
Absolutely,
and all of this is sort of like packaged into this very new and strange form of expression.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, of course, all of Norway is very short away from the forest. Even in a suburb like between Oslo and Ski, you can just walk right into the forest. I
could probably walk for like 5-10 minutes and I'd be in the middle of the woods.
Yeah, and you can tap into that feeling you get in the forest, which is essential to black metal.
Yep.
The Norwegian forest in particular.
But it's an interesting thought that it might be just peak Gen X, as you said, Ludwig, as well, that this is just, sort of like a cry for help, almost. But I think that's part of it. It's that aimlessness.
Yeah, it has to be.
Of growing up in a society that I think we still feel today. I was talking with my wife the other day about, this whole YouTube thing and the comments I've been getting on the videos, and when I look at the analytics about the age range of people who watch these videos and engage with the content, and I assume that this holds true for a lot of the other dissident right creators as well, considering there's a lot of cross-pollination. But this is basically like a generation of men who are nearing their 30s and realizing that, all right, I'm trying to get a grasp on the world, and you end up here trying to figure out, okay, now what? Everything's going to shit. What can I do about it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this could not exist, I think, outside of the Gen X. I think the boomers are just a little bit too idealistic, a little bit too clownish, and the millennials are too like touchy-feely to make something like this. Like to me, like the Gen X is like the coolest generation, probably the coolest generation that has existed in like the last 100 years. I say that unapologetically. It just seems to be something that about people who are like say like Morgoth or in these communities like Morgoth or Semi-Ogog or something. I feel like they have something about them that I just don't have. That's just this sort of like coolness factor.
Well, sure,
That's
cool
just
is
inherent to them.
in the X Factor sense, sure, but I think there's a lot of ways if we're rating generations. I think there's a lot of other generations the past 100 years that will get rated higher. But I understand what you're saying.
In terms of like virtues, most definitely. But if we talk about just like this sort of cool factor,
yeah, I can see that.
Then,
the X Factor
I
sort
think
of.
I think they win that one pretty easily. I think we should move on to the next one. So here we take more of a look at the kind of early days. Like from the documentary that I saw, like the it's pretty funny to see like in the sort of late 80s where this early community starts, where you have these sort of scenes of these few people who are able to find each other at concerts because they're into some of the darker parts of like the early British metal scene. Like say if you're into Venom like in the 80s and you're from Norway, you're from like one out of like maybe 10 15 people, and these people are somehow able to find each other through like this is pre-internet, right? So they find each other at concerts and they're pen pals. Like this is the original community pre-internet. It's being pen pals with people, recording shitty demo tapes in your living room or in your bathroom on limited instruments, and sending it to each other and seeing who can outdo the other guy in terms of extreme content. And this goes like from say like in Norway, Scandinavia, to places in Asia like Singapore, and they send it down to other places in Europe. They correspond and send back and forth. So you see this in the internet, a lot of these communities that pop up, and they seem to have an even kind of shorter lifespan because of how people just get so quickly tired of it. But one of the pictures there on top of the on the top left is like a screenshot of one of these tapes that they would send back and forth. They also had like these underground magazines that were just completely sort of amateur black and white A4 pages where they would write about like, okay, here are the new demo tapes that are coming out, and here are the new bands and some interviews, the stuff that you would get under the counter in music shops. So I don't know, Vingel, if you have some interesting facts to add about like the sort of early black metal community.
Well, maybe this is reiteration of your point, but they definitely were very keen on exchanging, sending tapes and vinyl records and stuff to each other by snail mail. I guess it's worth underlining that they would write letters by hand and stuff, of course, way before the internet. Even to like South America, like a band like Sarcophago is from there. So it's probably I heard Fenris saying it's probably like hell to be a black metal dude in Brazil or something, because you have to wear all that gear in the summer heat. But that's an aside. Probably don't have much to add, except Death Crush should be 1987, of course.
Yes. Oh shit! Damn.
PowerPoint. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. That's a bit of a bloop there for me. Yeah. But I guess Mayhem is like the first. I guess it's sort of formally known as like one of the first really sort of black metal bands, and they're able to actually put together a tape, and like you mentioned, Vingel, in that studio with the Death Crush record.
Yeah, but by the way, I could add, it's a sort of a trivia bit, but apparently the Mayhem guys went on an interrail tour of Europe in '86, and Euronymous was into German krautrock and electronic projects, and apparently has sat on the stairs of Konrad Schnitzler, who played in Tangerine Dream and I think Cluster before the Cluster released their first album. This is kind of nerdy right now, but anyway, he started corresponding with Schnitzler, and he actually sent them a tape of, or sent Euronymous a tape of his music, which they used for the intro track on Death Crush. So, I mean, it's kind of cool trivia if you're into the 1970s German electronic stuff.
I like that a lot. I didn't know that actually.
Yeah,
I mean, because that's what I.
track.
After I kind of stopped listening to metal, I started listening to stuff like Tangerine Dream and this other stuff. I didn't know that there was so much overlap between the people who like the one thing and the other. So it was interesting to see. I mean, Mayhem is a kind of unique product for the black metal scene, not just because they got together and made this music, because it was a very unique kind of mix of personalities. Øystein Ornseth, that sort of Euronymous, he is considered like one of the most kind of important figures of this movement, if you could call it that. Where he was the type of guy that seemed to just get really absorbed into it. That he kind of saw it as like this was kind of like his thing, and it didn't matter like how bad things got or how extreme it got. He wanted to sort of own the kind of black metal brand and further this more as a cultural movement rather than just an opportunity for him to play guitar. You have Per Yngve Olin that came in actually from Sweden, who is like his moniker was basically dead. Who is this also is like this character who had a sort of near-death experience as a young boy, where he was like beaten up by a gang of bullies over some like it was some very trivial ordeal where he was just kind of the odd man out at school and he was always picked on, and they beat him to the point where like I think his kidney rupture or something, they had to take him to the hospital and stitch him up again. But he had like a kind of near-death experience with that, where he was just thrown into more of this kind of hallucinatory space, and after that he was kind of obsessed with death in a very kind of artistic way. Like if you've seen Hereditary, like this girl who's played by this like this Shapiro woman, like the girl who walks around like picking up these dead birds and eating the chocolate, making these weird clicking noises. Like he was kind of like that, like just for real, not as a joke. He was just sort of obsessed with corpses, and he would pick up dead animals and put in like a kind of plastic bag to bring with him around places and put like dead animals on the shelf. I mean, he would talk about like trying to starve himself and cut himself and like trying to sleep in a coffin, and he'd just go on and on about this in not in a kind of like braggadocious way, but in more of like this sort of artistic kind of sensitive style. And he came into contact then, I guess, with Mayhem, and traveled then from Sweden to Norway to kind of live with them and be with that band. Of course, it didn't end well for him. I think he suicided at age 21.
Yep.
When things didn't go very well with the band. And of course, it's like if you could search on the internet, you find like the infamous photos that were taken where
he took the Cobain way out, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Euronymous. I mean, Euronymous basically took pictures when he found Per Yngve basically after having committed suicide, and he took the pictures because he just wanted to use it for cover art. So it sort of speaks about, even at that point, how like far into the stuff that he had gotten, and he was just only thinking about what he could do to further the black metal brand, and not really in terms of what his role as a friend or a human being. And I mean, he was told by this other guy in Mayhem, like the Necro Butcher. I don't remember his full name, that he should just delete the pictures, but they were still sort of leaked online later. And there's bootleg albums from Mayhem that where they're actually using his like the images of his suicide.
Jesus.
And when they talk about this sort of, I didn't want to include the pictures here because it is quite graphic.
No.
But when they're talking about, like blowing your brain out, I mean, that's literally what it is. It's not like an expression, it's actually a powerful shotgun, and his like the top of his head is literally just kind of blown out with the brain falling out in two pieces.
Yeah, I heard maybe, I mean, this is sort of drama, myth lore, black metal lore, but stuff I heard when I was a teenager was that they like used parts of his skull as pendants or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's not very cozy stuff. But
so that might also just be part of the myth, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that Euronymous would have loved.
Yeah, and but just one detail, I remember Dead apparently used to bury his clothes for a couple of weeks before going on stage and stuff, so that he could sort of smell sort of the musky odor of death or whatever,
Am I
like it'd be in
uh,
the grave.
am I right in remembering? I think I remember reading that Dead did a lot of the sort of vanguarding for the imagery of the black metal movement with the makeup and the aesthetics.
I think that's right. Yeah, certainly Mayhem.
Yes,
Probably
that's
Dead.
definitely my impression too. And just a lot of the theatrics and kind of insane stage performances, I think, go back to him. I mean, there's a lot of interviews with his members of Immortal and some of those other like second, third wave bands where they talk about seeing him live and watching him, self mutilate and other stuff on stage, and that kind of being not necessarily a point of inspiration, but just part of what I guess intrigued them about all of it is, wow, this dude's fucking crazy.
Took it to the next level, certainly. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
It's worth. I mean, we've already pointed it out, basically, but Mayhem's influence on the later black metal scene in Norway, like even though the Live in Leipzig record wasn't out until '93, I think it was recorded in like 1990 with Dead singing or doing vocals, and yeah, like Fenris and all these dudes had cassette tapes to listen to, like even way before it was officially released. And then in '94, Mayhem released De Mysteris Don Satanas, which they got a new vocalist, of course, Attila Shihar, who is a Hungarian dude. I think he's actually opera trained. I saw him, if I can go on a tangent, I saw him in 2009. I was 17 maybe, but I got in with Sun, or Sun O, as you might say, sort of a really, they play like really slow, drony doom music, and it was quite an experience because I was sitting on the first row, and a friend of mine had gotten a hold of a wine bottle and stuff and just enjoying. They spent 2 hours playing a 1 hour record that had just been released. And Attila Shihar, who was the vocalist of Mayhem at this time, '94, he had like a bird and stuff in his outfit. I mean, it was totally grim, cool experience. If you're into that sort of thing.
Vocally, he was a great fit for that band. I'm a huge fan of Attila's vocals, and it's funny because I believe he began correspondence with Euronymous because they had a mutual interest in new wave techno and stuff like that. Okay. And Attila also had a band, I think they've reformed recently, that does sort of a new wave industrial EDM stuff called Plasma Pool. That's worth checking out if that's your thing.
Never heard about that, but yeah, it's cool with all the techno metal crossovers because I'm a pretty big techno head myself, so I guess it's logical. But please go on, Varg.
Yes, but just finishing this one up, there are other characters in Mayhem that are interesting, but these three are, I guess, the sort of biggest draws, or the people you're going to know. Like with Dead, it goes back to what I talked about with the kind of metal entertainment product. But I mean, he wasn't even kidding. I think he was just totally authentic in everything he did, and he's a bit like the sort of Kurt Cobain of black metal. Varg Vikernes, under the moniker of Count Grishnak, was also a guy who came into the band. He is the guy who actually gave Per Yngve the rifle, apparently, that he shot himself with. Who is like this other completely sort of intense kind of maniac who comes down from Bergen to try to play with them, and starts living in the record shop that Euronymous starts. Of course, they end up having a sort of falling out later over like these sort of church burning episodes, and in terms of the ideological direction of the metal. And like with the way things are going, where he basically murders Euronymous, and that's sort of the infamous thing where people say that he was decapitated, or like there's so many myths around that, but apparently it was just sort of the interviews I've seen with Varg, he explains it as a kind of self-defense situation. But I mean, you can't get self-defense if you run after someone and stab them in the head 50 times. So it's just not how it works.
It's a Sam Hyde type of self-defense situation.
Exactly. I was just about to say.
What's the quote? If I'm in the bushes outside your window, it's a self-defense situation. Yep. Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Varg is just... I mean, he has no joke. I guess that's what people like about these, because these people aren't kidding. There's a lot of like LARPers in these, metal community, and people who play tough on stage and stuff like that. But like with these people are actually like kind of insane, like for real. It's not.
Oh yeah.
They're not just LARPing. So we can go to the next slide and look more at the record shop here. I mean, the kind of basis for the kind of true Norwegian black metal community was the Euronymous record shop, where the conclusion that Mayhem has is that they can't get any publishers, they can't get any record producers to really want to sell them, and there's no shops to buy and sell their type of music, so they are able to sort of rent their own place in Oslo and start this record shop that's called Hell. Where the entire shop is it's always like dimly lit inside there, and you're not allowed into the shop if you're not dressed in dark with nails and all this sort of stuff. Like if you were wearing blue jeans and white shoes, they would throw you out. Basically, it's so it attracted a lot of these kind of like hardcore people, or piqued the curiosity of a lot of young people to try to circle around and start kind of doing this idol worship thing of Euronymous. And I think he got sort of a bit high of that. So he was just living inside of this shop, like in the back there, just eating kind of like hot dogs for every meal, sitting inside the shop with makeup and just trying to scare people out of there. Varg Vikernes also lived here for a time, basically. I mean, you have the link there with that I said, but it's parodied on Metalocalypse. Yep. For those who are familiar with it, it's like this cartoon show it's just based in it's quite well made, but it's just based in making these jokes for people who are like really into this metal community stuff. But if you want to just click and show it on the stream, because it kind of summarizes what the entire entire shtick of this show was. It's too bad that it's not subtitled, because a lot of these clips, things go by pretty quickly and the sound is very jumbled.
Yeah, it wasn't the highest quality sound, but that's good.
No, but it's very in keeping with the theme.
Yes.
So you see the pictures here is of the store now. It's just called Nesebro, which means nosebleed. Like that's after Euronymous died, it was taken over and turned into more of a museum.
Yeah, but it's still very much a functioning record store. I used to go there quite a lot when I lived a few stone's throws away in the old town. It's pretty like it has a grim aesthetics, and you can it's right next door to the old store, but you can access the cellar there and stuff. But man, it's a very nice guy that runs it and stuff. I mean, they're not trying to sort of scare you or anything.
You can't do that anymore. So,
but it's it's a very cool store.
All right, let's play this clip and see what it's about.
See, behold, there's the first black metal record shops. What starts it all?
Is that a smoked fish place?
No, next to it, right there. Oh, the ski ship? No, there. This is my old friend Runke Snage.
Well, if you didn't start commercially successful, start your war tooth.
This guy seems like an asshole.
I'm a pagan strutting this conservative hell that is Norway.
Yeah, what the fuck are you listening to?
This sounds a demo tape from my band Pestakook, which means a horse is dead. Do you like it?
I don't know, we too key.
Then I hate it.
Hey, where's the Deathblock albums?
I don't sell them.
Too digital.
Well, it's nice to see you, but we gotta...
Oh, let's listen to more demo tapes, right?
All right. Yeah, I can see it with the, do you like it? Yes, well then I hate it.
Yep. I mean, it's summed up quite nicely. And if it's too digital, we don't sell it. We just sell these kind of shitty sounding demo tapes, and that's what we're doing. If you don't like it, you can just get the fuck out of there. That's it is a very attractive attitude, I think, especially for young people.
I don't know how they got footage of my basement in that TV show.
So, but like I talked about with this, with all the stuff that they were doing, it was really kind of moving in a very dark direction where people were trying to kind of top themselves, top each other, and see who could do, more messed up stuff, who could push the boundaries and so forth. And it is like the opposite of purity, but it's kind of like purity, dark purity, spiraling to the point where, I remember someplace I read that Euronymous started demanding that you couldn't say good day, hello and good day, sir, because it's never a good day. You have to say bad day or like fuck off or something like, so it gets to the point where it's, you're really trying to just have like the super hardcore, like these worshippers of darkness in there. I mean, the escalation or the point where this really kind of goes off the rails is when they start doing the church burnings. And like the clip there, like with the Euronymous interview, he actually makes a comment on it. If you want to listen to it, I mean, it's in Norwegian, but we can just translate for the.
It was very poorly, like the
it's
quality is too bad.
Quality, so I'll just try to explain what he says there. But they're asked about what do you think about these church burnings, and he gives like the most sort of accelerationist answer. That it's like, well, it's a really good thing because this is going to agitate the Christians, it's going to radicalize the Christians, and they're going to get angry, and everybody's going to get more angry, and that's going to increase the net amount of misery in the world. So it's a very positive thing for our movement and our music. So it's like the inverse Steven Pinker, basically. It's like increasing the net amount of misery.
You gotta get the Christians in touch with their dark side or something. He says.
Yeah, you need to bring back the Crusades and just make everything shittier, so you get the graph to go down. So
line go down with black metal. So
I mean, you have the church burnings with Varg Vikernes basically coming forward and saying that it was him. But this is a disputed thing where a lot of people believe that he said that only to get publicity. And there's been a sort of dispute about who actually were burning these churches and where if they actually caught the person responsible. But, he just came forth and said that it was me as a sort of way to draw attention to himself and the movement.
That would check out in the sense that, there's been theorized that, the reason Euronymous ended up being killed by Varg is this sort of like long ongoing power struggle between them. And if Varg is looking to sort of take over the throne, then assuming responsibility for that, in a weird sense, kind of makes him the king.
I think Varg has always said, at least since the trial and after, that he only lit Fantoft Stave Church outside of Bergen and perhaps Holmenkollen Chapel right outside of Oslo. And all of the others were sort of copycats or like people doing the same thing. But I don't think he claims to have done all of them, just the opposite, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my impression too, is he took credit for a handful of them and then, denied the rest.
Yeah. I used to watch
that
Julian Perspective YouTube channel quite a lot. When
I see too.
Yeah, good stuff.
I actually have some archives saved of a lot of those videos. Thank goodness.
Oh, I wish I did. So yeah.
I've only got a couple, but it's the high points, right?
I think he's been Susaned, right? So you can't find it on YouTube. I think there's some on Odyssey.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like you said, there was a power struggle there, and basically, like Euronymous apparently started sending death threats, or not sending death threats, but Varg gets wind that Euronymous is talking about, I'm just going to kill Varg Vikernes, and kill him in the forest and then film it and send out the videotapes afterwards. So I mean, they came to a point where under a confrontation, they started to scramble and fight, and then you get into like the quote unquote self-defense where he stabs him in the head multiple times, and then he sort of tries to get rid of the body in some lake, if I remember correctly. I mean, with the documentary that Vingold put out, Varg talks about, how, like, from his perspective, this was, the church burnings were really about trying to return to paganism as a kind of like pagan liberation movement. Yep. But Euronymous apparently, like, the newspapers were going with this kind of like Satanist angle, like this is Satanism, but Varg like wanted this to be like a political statement, and then Euronymous basically just goes into that kind of Satanist frame to play the media bad guy, and Varg apparently felt very kind of offended that he would do that and try to turn it into something that he didn't think was productive, for his political goals. So that's, I guess that's a part of the where the animosity comes from.
And I'm sure Euronymous having, a pull with a lot of newcomers to the scene, as we discussed here on the slide with the record shop and sort of the gatekeeping, you get a lot of power in being an idol in that sense.
Yes,
it probably pulls power away from Varg.
It certainly does, and I think for these guys, it was the combination of the how young they were and like how crazy some of them were. Like, this was authentic, and there's not a lot of places, like, say, for someone like Euronymous, if you get a taste of power, that you can actually exercise it in the way that he did, because he's a kind of small guy. I mean, you're seeing it on the photo there. He's not like this sort of really impressive person that would be like the captain of the sports team or anything else. So I think he really wanted to sort of hold on to that kind of godfather status that he had in the community, and it was just getting a little much for some people.
I just want to add, for autism's sake, I don't know about the part with the lake, but apart from that, good summary.
Righto, we could look at the next slide there to see some of the highlights.
We probably covered all of this.
Well, not all of it actually, because there's
we didn't talk about Faust.
Oh yeah,
we have then Faust from I think from the band Emperor, if I'm not wrong, yes, who then went to jail because he was approached by a gay man, and it ended with penetration, but just not the kind that he was looking for. So he basically stabbed the sort of homosexual who tried to get onto him, and I think he was like 12 years or something in jail for it. I mean, in the documentary that Vingold has posted, the people seem to see that as kind of a favorable thing. I don't think they would do that now with the current political climates, but it is something that happens.
The immediate reactions to it and how, anyways.
Yeah, they seem kind of impressed by it, actually.
Yes, definitely.
There's a point in the documentary where one of the Swedes, like, he has to think for a moment, because I think he's like censoring himself, but he says, like, he ends up saying, like, but he respected that he actually killed someone or something like that because he didn't think he had it in him. So that just tells you how extreme some of these guys were.
Yep. I added Funeral as well. That's a sort of less known drum-and-based band that basically had two of the members commit suicide. The church burnings we've already covered, and with like Varg Vikernes in jail, it's most of the energy in the movement, I think, kind of fades out a little bit after this has happened, and then some of these bands starts to reemerge again, like with Dark Throne and like Black Death Immortal, and they start making black metal, and it's a little bit more about the music, and they make a lot of good music, and it's able to chug along a bit more. But the kind of and they can sort of surf on these on the kind of legends of this stuff that's happened. It's I don't have anything more to add. I think we could look at the next slide.
Okay. Unless you have anything to add, Luke.
No, not necessarily. Sorry.
So this is one I think you should just have a slide on its own, because Varg is not just like a sort of black metaler, but he is more persistent because he apparently had a much greater interest in politics than anyone else. I mean, with both of you have seen, I was also watching the Thulian Perspective at one point. So he was active in prison, creating these ambient albums. I listened to them quite frequently. He did a lot of corresponding. Apparently he also had a connection to like the sort of Tom Metzger White Aryan Resistance at one point, which I don't have a lot of details. Do any one of you know anything about what was going on there?
I mean, I've done some research and some digging. The main thing that I found was that he was stockpiling ammunition and explosives, and then he was planning some attack on like a leftist, anarchist, like punk venue, I believe in Oslo, but I'm not totally sure. You'd have to check me on that. I think that's one of the big reasons why he got hit with such a huge prison sentence. Apart from the murder, of course, but yeah, my understanding too is
there
he
was that little
sending them
thing.
a lot of money. Do what?
No, I was just saying that. Well, I was going to point out the murder thing.
Yeah, and
but you said it, so.
Well, and I think that maybe the organizing and funding of a lot of these groups kind of played into his I don't know, sentencing. I'm not totally sure. The only thing.
No, but I can see it ending up as sort of being like a cautionary sort of judgment towards the entire movement in that sense. Like if he's the only one left who's somewhat of a leader, you give him sort of like a clear punishment to tell everyone else that, the party's over.
Yes.
And you can see, you see with the photos there where you go from like a younger Varg to an older one, where like the photo in the middle, I think, is when he was in prison. He went for more of this kind of Hitler Jugend type haircuts with the for the kind of straps. What do you call these sort of bootstraps?
Yeah, he's gone like camo gear ever since. I think. Yeah.
Yes.
And like just going back to the sort of Metzger stuff, for those of you not familiar, the Metzger was like this, what you'd call like an actual kind of white supremacist, unapologetic white supremacist movement in the United States, led by Tom Metzger. I guess the only kind of connection of the heritage of this movement is really the comics, like the a white man thing, like with they have like the comics that are made by this artist under the synonym A White Man that is then attributed to Ben Garrison, basically by the 8chaners, who Ben Garrison, who was like this libertarian kind of political cartoonist, and then they recolored a lot of these kind of more spicy white man comics to make them look like they were Ben Garrison's comics, and attributed them to him. And you still see them in a lot of memes today, even though, like, for people who are using these images who are like have no affiliation to these types of movements or politics at all, but they still use images from these images and slogans from these kind of more kind of like white supremacist cartoons. So these are like propaganda images. I just the point on Metzger is that where I think this intersects with the black metal is the kind of extreme image that they were projecting. You can find some interviews with Metzger on YouTube from most of it's been removed, but you have a show with Christopher Hitchens where he has an interview with Metzger's son, and like he has Metzger on the phone, and like this is the typical like this sort of 90s Wignat political movement thing. I'm not sure, it's easy to accuse people of being feds, but it generally seemed like that was the fashion at the time, to have these type of, try to just be as extreme as possible in every way, where these people just come right out and say, they're kind of like, queried by Hitchens about their, what's your religious views and what do you think about the, the like German events that happened and so on. And like these people just go out and say that we believe in might makes right, basically. And, we're this kind of like, almost like this kind of LaVeyan Satanist kind of view of the world, which is so optically awful when you're like this kind of small niche movement in the United States and you say that might makes right. where you basically
Well,
just,
sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're being just like crushed by the U.S. government, then you don't really have any recourse. I mean, the new left never made that case until they actually gained power in the system. So it's, yeah, I'm just saying
Well,
that the
you know,
branding
that's the
was
standard left modus operandi. It's you know, you use the rights playbook until you're in power, and then you discard it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So
I've never been a fan of sort of a Ragnar Redbeard might makes right type of thinking, because it's obviously self-defeating when you're in a weak position, and that's not the only reason either.
well,
I
sure,
believe in,
that's where I would sort of break with Varg's more recent Thulian writing as well. He seems to go quite hard on the almost, I guess, no, explicitly anti-civilization in terms of like a return to hunter-gathering type stuff, and I don't see that as realistic. He might be right, but I disagree.
I would probably agree with him more earlier, but yeah, there is what do you call it? The acceleration or collapse theory is in there.
I do,
But,
you know, as we talked earlier, I mean, his analysis on things is on par with pretty much anything else you find in the dissident right.
it's pretty funny. I'm sorry, Wallace, but I was just thinking about Keith Woods has referenced Varg frequently, or several times at least. But I was gonna say on the Metzger thing, just an aside, I recall being like this total Christopher Hitchens fanboy like 10 years ago. And I saw the Metzger and Son versus Hitchens TV appearance. And I haven't seen it in full since. But I recall like, oh my God, this guy is totally insane. And but I've seen other clips of Metzger since, and I'm like, what the hell? This guy is totally right. So
It's tricky.
Yeah, it goes to
I would
show.
say, especially in the 90s, a lot of the more kind of hard right nationalist movements. I mean, they laid out a prediction for the next 20 years. It's turned out to be pretty accurate. And while I don't necessarily agree with all their politics, it's hard to ignore that they got a lot of things right. And
I agree.
Yeah, as
it's just
far as-
that the branding was
Yeah.
just completely toxic. There was just fucking garbage branding, but they
Oh
had
well, yeah,
the right
they
ideas.
screwed themselves. And I mean, I think it's funny, like when he was a Wignat, so he was part of the creativity movement, which is some weird white supremacist like religion thing that tried to take off in the mid '90s. He went on Oprah or something, and it's just surreal because by the end of the show, they bring in a therapist that tells the audience that this kid is basically evil, and we can't help him, and he's beyond help, and and like the audience just starts screaming, you know, boo, boo, like what the hell
Jesus.
is going on? But yeah, in my experiences, the groups that I've like brushed paths with, yeah, they tend to thrive off of that kind of extremist, you know, I'm more hardcore than you type attitude. Whoever can say the most outrageous things in public, you know, tends to get more respect. And I guess
think
that's where
that's
the overlap
something
with black
about
metal
the
comes from.
vanguardism, quote unquote, of the dissident right now is the more
Yes.
long-term solution thinking rather than, you know, who can say the most edgy stuff until
Yeah,
we all get
it's wild,
arrested by
those
the FBI.
groups. Yeah, I mean the groups don't exist anymore, exactly, because they got infiltrated and everybody got arrested for the most part, especially around here. It's crazy.
But if nothing else, you know, if you don't follow, you can follow Varg for the shit posts on Twitter. That's a fucking sentence to say in 2020. He posts. I'm not sure if I follow him, but he floats around my timeline, so I feel like I do.
I usually hear
and he
about
posts a
it,
lot
right?
of smart stuff, but he's very good with words and dunking on people. And he has a role-playing game apparently.
Yes, my
there's his account.
It's on Amazon.
Yeah.
Go get it.
Oh, nice, good
So
dunks.
if nothing else for the laughs, here's a gold mine. So
Right,
but
I think
that's the
enough
essence
from-
of his
yeah.
Thulian perspective, because now he lives with, I think, his wife or something, and
Has a
and
lot of
like
kids,
7
too.
children
Yes.
at a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and
Yeah.
and he's sort of, I guess, just content to sort of live out the end of times,
It
the
seems
end
like
times.
it.
Sorry, yeah.
He's got a car that will run till the end of time, so that helps.
There's like a Jeep or something.
There's some kind of old Soviet car that he fixes himself.
Oh,
I mean, again, if you
okay.
watch the videos, half of them are him, in the hood fixing something. Yeah.
I would like to know more about the woman who married him, just out of interest.
Oh,
I've heard she's a lot like him.
I was like, what about him attract? Like, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze here. I'm just interested in what's her deal.
She contacted him while he was in jail. French lady.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think like a lot
One
of
of
these people who
those.
go to jail are like really. They draw a lot of women. I think Charles Manson was.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was gonna
in
say.
jail,
She's one of those girls. Yep.
Yep.
That's the last of your problems. So if you go to jail for something like that, don't worry about being an incel. You're just gonna be like your mailbox is gonna be full by these women who want to marry you.
So there you go, everyone. Go to prison.
Go ahead.
That's only 50% the joke, actually. I think it would work. Anti-incel treatment.
Oh.
I was just gonna say it's worth mentioning the cover art here is of course Theodor Kittelsen. Up under fjellet toner en lur, or up under the mountain, lur sounds out. You can say lur is the instrument there.
Yeah.
And we could probably do a whole stream on the historical event that this depicts, because she's warning the farmers of the valley that there's a Scottish mercenary army headed their way.
Yep.
And the Scots get absolutely savaged by the Norwegian farmers. But okay, enough about that. Probably.
Yeah, we have some slides to get through, and we're nearing 3 hours. So we're sorry.
Yeah.
Here we are. Norwegia booze.
So yeah, I just wanted to get the take from Luke here. If you have some of this stuff, like these kind of LARPers who get into this kind of black metal stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Normally they don't stick around for long just because they get gate-kept out. People like me and people like, some of my friends do a pretty good job, I think, of not necessarily telling them to fuck off, but just discouraging them from thinking of themselves in the same way that kind of we think of ourselves, I guess. Is trying to give them a little bit of like self-awareness, for lack of a better term. Let me think. I used to see it more a couple years ago, but again, I think as the political situation has gotten more tenuous, there's more people that are just kind of rejecting black metal whole cloth. It's weird, but within the last couple of years, I've had people tell me that it's an explicitly, Wignat white supremacist music genre, which
this absolute wizard though on the left.
Yeah, I mean,
this is the face of Wignats. This guy's gonna ruin the state.
It's just what blows my mind is I want to ask these people, like, do you live under a rock? Do you just spend all your time inside? Which ultimately they do. They spend all their time inside on the internet. But
you used the word Norwegia boo, Ludwig, but I suppose the boo it can count multiple directions. It's more a personality type than a.
I would say so, and that's kind
single
of the struggle.
phenomenon.
Is I don't necessarily want to be like mean to these people because it is more so their personality type. It's who they are. They're going to be like that regardless of what they latch onto. It's just kind of the state of modern people, honestly. But I definitely see it. It's not something I like to see, obviously, but.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to play the clip from the documentary there. it is this kind of like black metal was a mistake type clip from this.
Let me see if I can bring it up.
This dude who's like running an art exhibition in Florida, like in California. That's based on black metal, and like this is kind of the moron view, you know.
Yeah.
That's how I imagine the. Yeah.
Sorry, it's the Harmony Korine thing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
He just kind of sums up, I think, the mindset of this.
I've been obsessed with like these Norwegian black metal bands. So my new show is like just dedicated to black metal. It's just like pure, like most uncommercial music. It's like pure death. It's like pure, like it's like the pits of death. It's the most uncommercial music. I went to Norway where all the guys burned the churches down and murdered each other and like in prison making music. I like visited like Euronymous' grave and death and all this good because I love black metal, the most extreme music in the world.
Hilarious. Yeah.
That hurt.
By the way, Harmony Korine made a film called Gummo, which I really liked at least like 10 years ago. But he's a pretty pretentious dude, for sure.
But yeah, essentially what this guy has done is he bought himself a kimono and a katana, and he's going to go to Japan and become yeah.
Well, it just becomes so hyper real at that point. It really sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all I have on that one. Just wanted to have a slight, look at kind of the mainstreaming of this this genre. So Dimmu Borgir is one of these bands that I associate really with the mainstreaming of it, and it's one of the first bands that I was exposed to in like the 2000s, where they really went on like it was less commercial in the beginning, but they used the synthesizer a lot and had like a more symphonic sound. And they moved towards making it very good productions and doing like these more normie friendly stuff, more like instrumental stuff. I mean, it isn't normie friendly in the conventional sense, but it is sort of like you could listen to parts of it and think that this is actually quite rad. It's not like it's trying to purely scare you away, because some of the groundwork and the mainstreaming of that look had already been done. So it's not like you're completely like it's completely alien. It's like there's something slightly safe about it, and then they use that to kind of develop their music. I mean, Bam Margera comes back again because he uses that. One of their songs, I don't remember which one it is. Like it's this, when they start sounding more industrial towards the end of their career, and it becomes like this YouTube music phenomena. As I've noted in the bullet points here, they get the Spellemannprisen. That is like this It's like these musical awards basically. And at that point, you're kind of mainstreamed if you're going on.
If you get the Grammy, their Norwegian Grammy. Basically,
yes,
you're mainstream. That's the point, isn't it?
And they're playing on those shows, so you turn on NRK, the Norwegian kind of state television, and they're showing them on stage playing. They're getting these awards. I mean, they had the soundtrack. I think if it's on Hellboy 1 or Hellboy 2, one of their instrumental tracks that was used as a soundtrack. They were able to do this kind of concert with the Norwegian radio orchestra. It's kind of like Metallica, like with the orchestra, where they had like this larger stuff. So they were quite mainstream. They were, I think they were played on the radio at some point. It was a commercial name. I think they also had, one of the highest record sales of any black metal band. What do you think of them, Luke? Is this like up your alley, or do you think this is too commercial?
I think it's too commercial. And I think this is indicative of when a lot of the black metal bands started to make money, and they had the option of cleaning up their production and making higher quality sounds and getting more musicians and adding synthesizers that were more, I guess, complex than the ones they previously used. Because I mean, I like. I believe it's Shagrath is the front man. I think he's pretty cool. He's given some cool interviews, but I just think that he made a lot of mistakes, kind of popularizing this very clean, hyper-produced, almost again hyper-real kind of orchestral music. I really don't like the incursion of, especially like the orchestral stuff into black metal. And it's like Satiricon is next on the bullet point, so I can talk about them later. But they kind of
when part of the when part of the movement was the underground aesthetic, then shaking that off, even though you could say that maybe they've cleaned up the image of black metal to a certain extent, it's come at the cost of the authenticity, maybe.
Yeah, I would say so. Yes, some of the authenticity, and I think what is it? It's on the tip of my tongue. It's just some of the uniqueness, some of the stuff that really set it apart from other music genres. That set it apart from thrash and death metal and heavy metal. You know, is just the low production, the focus on creating an atmosphere, creating kind of a I mean, again, it's a lot about the mindset and the atmosphere that it creates, I think. And I think that that kind of went away when they cleaned up everything.
Yes.
I have an anecdote relating to that. I was walking out from the Øya festival in Oslo, 2009, 10 maybe, and Satiricon were headlining. And I just remember hearing the vocalist going like, "Åssen har dere det, Oslo?" Like, "How are you, Oslo?" Like crowd pleasing Spinal Tap style. And you kind of lose part of the grimness and coldness and edge, obviously, when when you're sort of like doing that.
Yeah, this became a household name, Satiricon. I also want to mention there because it seems like when you mainstream this genre, there's like two paths you can go down. Like you have the Dimmu Borgir type of path where you get this very grand, symphonic, overproduced sound that is like this, super movie soundtrack like style, or you have like the Satiricon that's like the kind of black and roll, death and roll style where they don't use the synthesizer, but it's more like they make it more malleable for the public with these kind of beats where it sounds more like a kind of a little bit more punk rocky, a little bit more rock and roll type thing where it's catchier, but it still retains a bit of that kind of crispy soundscape. And the singing is not as bad, and the production is also very good. So Satiricon was able to get like the VG-lista top 10. That's basically like the Norwegian kind of like top 10 hits list. And they play. I remember being in Oslo actually seeing that because they played the standalone hit King on stage. Just coming on right after some trap, like some sort of pop, Euro pop artist or something. So, I mean, at that point, it was just, really like this is like totally mainstream commercialized. But I gotta admit, I still like the sound, honestly. So what's Luke's take on this one?
It's a decent sound. I hate that song you brought up, and to me, when they played that particular performance, I more or less decided the band had died. And maybe that's kind of harsh because I have respect for Sater and what he did in trying to kind of popularize the music and expand it a little bit. And I mean, I think Satiricon, their early discography, is phenomenal. Like Dark Medieval Times is a wicked record. Let me think. And the black and roll style, I think it can work. I know Talke, that's more the sound that he went for. And I think he did a really good job. I know he got nominated for a bunch of awards, but his, quote unquote, Islamophobic lyrics, got him banned from those award shows or whatever. I don't know the exact circumstances, but, Satiricon hasn't made good music since really 96, in my opinion.
I agree with you there, Luke. Like, I'm not trying to shit on Satiricon as a whole at all. Yeah. And it's noteworthy the Storm project that Fenris and Satir did in '94, I think, which was sort of a national romantic side project where they had a female vocalist and stuff. they mixed Norwegian folk music and metal, which
Yes.
I personally don't think worked really, and Fenris doesn't think so either in retrospect. But it's a noteworthy theme.
Yeah, no, and I think a lot of attempts to really mix that more authentic folky sound. I know, oh crap, who is that woman who got a lot of hatred for trying to start that band that was mixing folk and black metal, and she only sang clean vocals? It was a couple years ago.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyways, I think it can work, but I don't think it's really done. It's been done well up until this point.
Yeah, there's something about fusion music in general, like
Yes.
can work, but like I've heard Indian raga music meets jazz and stuff, but it's liable not to work.
And
in
I
most
guess
cases.
segueing, yeah, I think that's one of the big problems with black metal in the scene right now is you have a lot of these massive record labels that pick up these bands that intentionally fuse sounds. It's just a gimmick, but I guess it's exciting. It's kind of like having keys jangled in your face. It's something you haven't seen before. Oh, somebody's mixing black metal with traditional African, I don't know, reggae beats. I mean, it's stupid. Yeah.
It is like novelty restaurants or something. It's like you can open up a novelty restaurants and you get business for 1 month or something, and it just goes back to like regular losing propositions. But that's very much what metal is. I mean, you have the people who just do the tried and true, who have the brands, who can just sort of live off that, and you have the people who try to make a name for themselves. But the niches are just so small and specific now that it's like there's very little left to cover. That's not just a total gimmickry.
Have any of y'all heard of it's a band Batushka from Poland, I believe? It's a bummer they fell apart because I feel like they're one of the few groups that really hit a perfect balance of creating a new sound that was authentic, that fused elements of it's like orthodox church music.
Interesting.
And they incorporate a lot of, I guess, more avant-garde kind of rhythm and bass lines and stuff like that. But of course, the band fell apart. It started as an anonymous project, but again, as soon as the money started to appear, the producer of the band took it and turned it into this bastardized kind of homunculus of a band. It really sucks.
The closest thing to something like that, which might as well be just as the same thing with the it's just two things clashing together. But I did get to see those. What are they called? Their name is a pun. Those Mongolian guys that play like hard rock, unlike the Who. Yes.
Yeah.
That was a good time. I didn't expect much, but they delivered, and it was rock and roll.
Yes.
So
they're touring in the U.S. pretty soon, and I had some friends that wanted to grab tickets. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
For my case, it was worth the money. Like, I didn't have a religious experience or anything, but it was a fun time,
I feel like it would be very entertaining. And
yeah, it is. And they're very good at, you can stand there with all the other guys and chant Who, and be like a Mongolian for a bit.
And I guess it plays into kind of the characteristics of black metal specifically. There is like a national component to it, in my opinion. Not that the Who is black metal by any means, but
no, I wouldn't categorize it as that, but
no.
I'm sure a lot of people who are interested in the similar stuff would find some joy in it.
Yes, I see a lot of
but I wouldn't expect it to. I wouldn't expect it to, change your perspective on the world.
Who knows? Maybe it will.
I never heard about this band, but the similarities between Attila Shihar's vocals with Mayhem, for example, and some Mongolian throat singing are pretty obvious in parts. So I guess
it's a great comparison.
Mm-hmm. That's one dude that can really control his voice. Man, it's amazing. But let's move on.
Yep, no, Talk. I don't really have much on it. That's one of the newer bands that just do this kind of black and roll, death and roll style, where it's like even more commercialized. I mean, for those interested, they sort of just built further on that. But I think we covered this one pretty nicely. We get to the last slide, it's really more of like a finishing up the whole thing.
Yeah, I think we're at the end of the. Well, we have one more. That's the future of black metal.
This is really the last slide that I had, because I mean, for me, I've not paid that much attention to the scene, but I don't know if Luke has have anything more in terms of input on where the scene is going in the future, and if there's anything interesting that's coming up that people can look forward to.
I really do, honestly. There's a lot of smaller labels now that are putting out some really great stuff, both in the US and in Europe, and I mean, really everywhere. And the economies of scale that have opened up with the internet has allowed for a lot of, you know, small town, like small time artists to really get their music out there. And there's been a lot of activity, I know, in the States as far as underground bands gaining a little bit of traction on some of these, small record labels that'll distribute maybe like 100 LPs per release and stuff like that. And I know, there is a lot of exciting stuff happening, and there's a lot of great bands. I mean, there's almost too many for me off the top of my head just to say. I mean, I ordered, it's a band off of a label, Nuclear War Now, called Perverted Ceremony, that I think is doing some really cool stuff. It definitely doesn't have that same kind of ideological, atmospheric edge to it that I think it once did. And if anything, it's a bit unfortunate, because I think, especially when you consider bands like Dark Throne and Mayhem and a lot of, Burzum, I think the best years of the music, it's already happened. I think the peak has kind of been reached. And, I guess it's up to us to kind of reconcile like what we do with it. For me, I think there's political and kind of ideological angles that have yet to be explored with a lot of the music. And I think, again, political kind of organizing maybe, but I'm not totally sure. I'm still working on hashing that out. I tried my hand at organizing a while ago, and it was a complete disaster. So
That's interesting.
Well, it's always going to be an issue whenever you try to organize anything like this, and it's if it's true lesson. And it happens to be critical of the the current status quo, then it's only a matter of time before someone calls you the N-word.
Yes, it's happened to me multiple times, and
yeah,
I'm pretty fair skinned, so it's a bit unusual.
Yeah, I mean, and especially with these kind of environments that and communities that form around music, I think it would be difficult to organize people. I've played in bands. I think it's difficult just to organize 4 people to sit and play, because there's a certain personality type that recurs here. That is just kind of like high openness and low conscientiousness seems to recur there. But they can do good stuff by just
this poster.
Yeah,
that is an excellent.
Sorry, I was just. He's been chatting. He seems quite knowledgeable in the chat here. There's some black metal on his channel. If anyone's listening to this and are interested in apparently something new, you can have a look here.
All right, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll check it out too.
Bjarki is a very bass dude that I sort of know through the internets here, and Dödamskar is actually the band that I mentioned without saying the name earlier. The first record is from '94, which is more straight black metal, with Fenris as part of the band. So
I've only really listened to the first record. So
you only, or you don't?
No, I'm saying I've only really listened to the first record.
Yeah,
as
same
far
here,
as sit down and listen to it.
Yeah, they get really sort of progressive or technical later, but yeah, same here.
So I guess Isengard would be another good kind of very avant-garde black metal. But I mean, again, I know he put out another record, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, I was. We never mentioned the obvious Lord of the Rings references, but of course, Isengard, Fenris,
Yes.
side project, Gorgoroth, the plane in Mordor.
At this point, we could almost do like a modern black metal deep dive. I mean, there seems to be enough to talk about here.
I mean, we could. There is definitely a lot to discuss as far as, like there's a lot of cool music coming out of Quebec, and I speak French, so I've spoken to some of those people, and there's definitely a lot going on, and it has me hopeful. And I guess as far as organizing goes, you're absolutely right. I think the key is gatekeeping, and I think the key is there's a lot of people within black metal that are more amenable. They're more willing to accept a lot of what I have to, propose, and a lot of the truths that I think we see in the world. But the issue is finding those people, of course.
Yes. I think it's healthy just to have these communities alive producing culture, but it's not going to be like this big, have a black metal political party or something. They have to just, be. It's just a cultural movement basically that is putting out something that can inspire people and have somewhere to express those feelings and thoughts ideologically, and like that's and that's good for what it is, and we're appreciating it now, and we should keep try to appreciate these things in the future. But this is not going to be the organizing point for changing the West, so to say.
It's just music that isn't explicitly left wing is refreshing.
Absolutely,
certainly. Yes. And I think on that note, we are 3 and almost a half hours in. It's time for this to come to an end.
Yes.
Before we go, I would like to remind you of my new Subscribe Star. It is subscribestar.com/a-walrus. If you have a look through the Longhouse episodes and you like what you hear, like what you see, consider becoming a monthly donor. All of the money will go toward improving the show, and also make our lives and my life easier in terms of producing more solo projects, if you're interested in that. So on that note, I will wish you all a... Oh, yes.
Sorry. You want to let us chill?
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course.
I'll just chill my channel. I uploaded the black metal documentary, and my latest video is from a Norwegian documentary about how Churchill sort of provoked the war in Norway.
Very interesting video, yes. So you should subscribe to Vingle. He has a lot of interesting videos. A lot of nice art.
Thank you, Walrus.
Luke, do you have anything you want to share?
I do not, but I want to wish everyone a blessed Earth Day, comrades. I just got the notification on my computer.
So. Diversity is our strength.
Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah.
Luddick, do you have anything you wish to share?
Of course.
Yeah, I guess I could just add to the stuff that you sometimes forget. I mean, the people who are here, if you haven't smashed the like button, smash the like button, share the video, comment, because that helps the algorithm.
Yeah, that really helps.
Generally, just encourage people to do stuff that shares the algorithm, because this is not like natural algo boosted content, but would like to have more people come and watch it. So.
Just then, tell your friends the dissident rights sphere is small enough as it is. It's important that we share viewership across the channels, I think. And we will be back on Saturday, actually, this week, to look at NATO and talk a bit about current events and geopolitics. And until then, hang on. Yes, until then, I'll wish you a good evening or a good day. And if you're Orthodox, happy Easter. Is that correct?
It's coming up, I believe.
Yeah. Happy coming Easter. Maybe I'll wish it again on Saturday. All right. Have a good night.